Chapter 1365. Hall of Ice and Fire, Open. Boom. Qing Longzi and Xiao Yu instantly collided. Afterwards, a deafening explosion rang out in the air. Afterwards, Xiao Yu and Qing Longzi both took several dozen steps back. Qing Longzi is only an invincible emperor lord, right? He's actually on par with Xiao Yu? Zhuowen narrowed his eyes at this sight. He was shocked by Qing Longzi's battle prowess. After all, Xiao Yu was a half-saint who had grasped the laws of fire. In terms of battle prowess, he was definitely much stronger than regular invincible emperor lords. However, Xiao Yu was unable to gain any advantage over Qing Longzi. It was clear just how terrifying Qing Longzi's strength was. Is this all the peak lords of the inner court have? Let's try again. Qing Longzi sneered. The dragon's roar on his body became louder and louder. Battle intent surged into the sky, forming a terrifying storm. Xiao Yu's expression was ugly. Qing Longzi's strength had somewhat exceeded his imagination. His cultivation was below his, but he was still able to force him to retreat. He was just too monstrous. Qing Longzi, the energy of the myriad ghost yin congregation arrays in the other 4 cities has been collected. However, the myriad ghost yin congregation array in 3 origin city has been destroyed. There is no need for us to stay. Skyworm suddenly sent a voice transmission to Qing Longzi. This time, they had come to the 9th Netherworld realm to collect some energy from the flesh and blood of Emperor Realm cultivators. Now that they had been discovered by the people of the inner court, there was naturally no reason for them to stay. After all, if the 3 saints of the inner court were drawn out, they wouldn't even be able to leave. Qing Longzi frowned slightly. He replied coldly, "Don't order me around. You don't have the right." Tian Jiyu was stunned. Soon after, he replied with a sunken expression, "I'm not ordering you around. I'm just suggesting. If you're not leaving, I'll be leaving first." As he spoke, Tian Jiyu took out a medallion. A profound spatial energy surged out from the medallion. Tian Jiyu glanced deeply at Zhuowen before disappearing under the spatial energy. A spatial teleportation medallion. Sapphire sure is generous. He actually gave you such a precious medallion, Xiao Yu said with a rather ugly expression. Qing Longzi did not say much. He took out his token and left the Divine Spectre realm. This spatial teleportation token had a special teleportation array that could allow one to enter from the outside world without going through the entrance of the Divine Spectre realm. Its nature was somewhat similar to illegal immigration. Old Man Xiao, you need to tell Marshal Granduncle Yang Ji and the others about the Skyworm. Looking at Qing Longzi's appearance just now, I'm afraid that the relationship between the Skyworm and the Blue Dragon Hall isn't ordinary. Zhuowen suddenly said to Xiao Yu. The heavenly insect was something that even Xiao Hei was extremely fearful of. Zhuowen had no choice but to be cautious. Originally, Zhuowen had thought that the heavenly insect would disappear along with Mufeng's death. However, he didn't expect that the heavenly insect's life force to be so tenacious that it actually didn't die in the end. That black thing beside Qing Longzi is a heavenly insect. Xiao Yu's expression turned cold. Soon after, he said cautiously, I indeed have to tell Marshal Uncle Yang Ji and the others about this matter. Looks like we have to guard against that Blue Dragon Hall. Looking at the appearance of the heavenly insect and Qing Longzi, I'm afraid that the 2 of them have reached some kind of agreement. If necessary, the heavenly insect must be eliminated. Zhuowen's expression was extremely solemn. After inheriting the memories of the Bai Fang, he was very clear about the terror of the heavenly insect. Even if it was only a heavenly insect clone, and its growth might be limited, it was still not something that a mere 9 secluded realm could accommodate. If he was not careful, the heavenly insect might bring disaster to the 9 secluded realm. Xiao Yu shook his head and said, if the heavenly insect really has a deep relationship with the Blue Dragon Hall, our Divine Spectre realm will not be able to eliminate the heavenly insect. After all, the Blue Dragon Hall stands behind it. That Blue Dragon Hall is the #1 power in the 9 secluded realm, and its foundation is much deeper than our inner courtyard. Hearing that, Zhuowen frowned. Could it be that he was going to let the heavenly insect grow stronger like this? Brat, you should increase your own strength as soon as possible. The heavenly insect is currently in the Blue Dragon Hall, so you won't have the chance to eliminate that guy. The only thing you can do now is to continuously become stronger. If you become strong enough, the heavenly insect will not be able to threaten you. Xiaohei suddenly said. Zhuowen was startled, then nodded his head. Xiaohei was right. Rather than hoping for the heavenly insect to be destroyed, it was better to strengthen himself. The two of you return to the inner courtyard first. I'll stay here and observe. Maybe those two bastards haven't left yet. Xiao Yu instructed, then flew towards the direction of Misty Delight City. Zhuowen, let's go as well. I need to inform the Sky Capital Peak Master about this matter. At that time, the inner courtyard will send some experts to search this place. What happens next is not something we can worry about. Xu Ronghua smiled at Zhuowen. Let's go. Zhuowen nodded, then activated the Scarlet Cloud flying sword. The two of them turned into a stream of light and disappeared from the place. 3 days later, the two of them returned to the inner courtyard. Xu Ronghua bade farewell to Zhuowen, then returned to Sky Capital Peak to report what had happened at the border. Zhuowen returned to Mysterious Origin Peak and silently cultivated, waiting for the opening of the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace. Later, Xiao Yu also returned to Mysterious Origin Peak, but judging from his ugly expression, he did not gain anything. Time passed by. When the sun shone on the earth in the early morning, the entire inner courtyard began to bustle with noise and excitement. Many disciples who were originally in seclusion walked out of their seclusion, each with a look of excitement in their eyes. A slender figure walked out of an elegant bamboo house on Mysterious Origin Peak. Lu Qingwei raised her head and stared at the huge Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace in the sky above the 9 peaks. The corners of her mouth curled into a smile. After half a year of hard work, my cultivation base has finally risen from the 7th layer Emperor Realm to the 8th layer Emperor Realm. I hope I can get a good ranking for Mysterious Origin Peak this time. Lu Qing said confidently. Not far from Lu Qing, a young man also walked out of a large bamboo house. The young man stretched his waist and looked at the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace in the center of the 9 peaks. His eyes were full of expectation. On Sky Capital Peak, Mu Chunxue stood gracefully. Not far from her, Zhen Mu was staring at Mu Chunxue's back with an expressionless face. Senior brother Yang Yi, why haven't you come out yet? The Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace is about to open. Not far away, Feng Nianlan stood with her hands on her waist and shouted loudly under Yang Yi's pavilion, attracting the attention of many disciples. What's the hurry? It hasn't started yet, has it? Yang Yi slowly walked out of the pavilion. His eyes were hazy and he always looked like he hadn't woken up. He raised his head and looked at the hall of ice and fire floating in the air. He yawned and said, "Call me again when we start." Then, Yang Yi patted his butt and lay down on the floor of the pavilion. He closed his eyes and began to sleep. On Divine Devil Peak, Fu Yu crossed his arms and his eyes were full of fighting spirit. Beside him stood a rather simple and honest young man. Jianan, your talent is not bad. It has only been 3 months and you have successfully cultivated the second transformation of the 9 transformations of demons and gods. The opening of the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace is an opportunity for you. Seize it well. Fu Yu said to the young man beside him. Hihi, that's for sure. Jianan grinned and replied in high fighting spirit. On Taishen Peak, Moyan Wushang and Qingyin stood quietly behind Yuan Wanhe. Yuan Wanhe stared at the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace and said softly, "Junior sisters, this time we don't intend to fight for a good ranking. We just need to do our best. Everything has to be done according to our ability because the dangers of the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace are not small." Moyan Wushang and Qingyin looked at each other and nodded. On Hidden Sword Peak, on top of a sword-shaped building, Xu Lingping stood quietly with a small sword on her waist. A cool breeze blew, blowing her messy hair. Xu Lingping finally spoke. She slowly turned around and stared at the determined young man behind her. Mo Lingtian, if you want to prove yourself, prove it in the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace. If you can persist to the 5th floor, I will ask the Peak Master to pass the complete Heaven Burial Sword Manual to you. Mo Lingtian cupped his hands and said with a determined expression, "Senior Sister Shu, don't worry. I will not disappoint you this time." Looking at the determined young man in front of her, Shu Lingping's beautiful eyes flickered. She was slightly moved, but she quickly regained her calmness and said calmly, "I hope so." On Great Void Peak, Ding Xinghua, who was dressed as a Taoist, rubbed his hands and smiled at the girl beside him. "Junior Sister Gatha, the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace is very dangerous. When you enter, you have to follow me closely. I will protect you." Gatha raised her chin and snorted, "Fight with me first. If you can defeat me, I will listen to you and let you protect me." Hearing this, Ding Xinghua's face suddenly turned bitter. "Junior Sister, aren't you making things difficult for me? Your Heaven's Wrath armored soul is too abnormal. I'm afraid I can't defeat you." "You can't defeat me, and you still want to protect me?" Gatha snorted, then patted her collar and said proudly, "It's more like I'll protect you. Once we enter the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace, you have to follow me closely. I will protect you." On Profound Underworld Peak, a young man with a blue ruler on his back silently stood on the peak. His gaze was not on the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace, but in the direction of Profound Origin Peak. "Peak Master wants me to enter the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace this time to properly teach that guy called Zhuoan a lesson. Looks like I can have some fun." Xian Kai grinned. His smile was extremely cold. Above the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace, there was a layer of white clouds. On the white clouds was a white round table. At this moment, 12 figures were sitting at the round table. These 12 figures were the 9 Peak Masters, Yang Ji, Wen Bai, and Jiang Xian. It's finally time for the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace to open again. I wonder who will go the furthest and last the longest this time? Yang Ji laughed. Chapter 1366. Entering the Ice and Fire Dual Pole Palace, everyone at the round table curled their lips. Clearly, they were not interested in Old Man Tianju's boasting. However, they could not refute him. Yang Yi was indeed the most talented genius in the Inner Academy. The other 8 Peak Masters were envious of Old Man Tianju for being able to find a genius like Yang Yi. We are not surprised that Yang Yi is first. Let's discuss which of the 9 peaks will be ranked last. Xian Zhong narrowed his eyes and glanced at Xiao Yu. He suddenly laughed strangely. Sure enough, when Xian Zhong said that, everyone's eyes fell on Xiao Yu. Xiao Yu's face immediately turned ugly. "What are you looking at? Our Ao Yuan peak may not be ranked last." Xiao Yu glared at Xian Zhong and said coldly, "Junior brother Xiao Yu, I didn't say that your Ao Yuan peak is ranked last. Why are you so anxious?" Xian Zhong mocked. Xiao Yu's face froze. He immediately kept quiet. Xian Zhong was obviously targeting him, but he could not refute him. After all, Ao Yuan Peak was ranked last among the 9 peaks. Alright, we can't come to a conclusion about the final ranking. The violent energy on the surface of the Ice and Fire Dual Pole Palace will soon weaken. We just need to watch the performance of those little fellows. Yang Ji waved his hand and said, causing everyone at the round table to quiet down. The Ice and Fire Dual Pole Palace quietly floated in the middle of the 9 peaks. 9 thick chains extended from 9 directions and landed on the top of the 9 peaks, fixing them in the air. The white fog that lingered around the middle of the 9 huge peaks gradually dissipated at this moment. The 9 peaks appeared very clear at this moment. At the bottom of the 9 peaks, countless official disciples and nominal disciples raised their heads and looked at the 9 peaks and the Ice and Fire Polarity Palace in the center. Their eyes were filled with shock. They had just entered the inner courtyard not long ago, and it was their first time seeing the 9 peaks and the Ice and Fire Polarity Palace. This was especially true for the Ice and Fire Dual Pole Palace. Such a magnificent building and the ice and fire energy emitted from its surface completely shocked these official disciples and nominal disciples. The Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace has a total of 18 levels. They contain the power of ice and fire, and contain great opportunities. If one is lucky, they can break through their current realm in a short time. Although this is the time when the energy of the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace is at its weakest, the danger is still very high. Everyone who enters must be cautious. Do not be greedy and act rashly. If you cannot withstand it, you can just think of leaving. When the time comes, I will hear your thoughts and teleport you out. A dignified voice rang out from the clouds above the Hall of Ice and Fire. It was like a clap of thunder as it reverberated through the entire inner courtyard. It was Yang Ji's voice. When these words were spoken, countless disciples on the 9 peaks revealed excited expressions as they involuntarily nodded their heads. Ice and Fire Dual Extremes Palace, open now. Afterwards, Yang Ji's voice sounded again. Then, the sound of a door opening reverberated from the Hall of Ice and Fire. The large doors of the Hall of Ice and Fire, which were dozens of feet tall, opened to the sides. Waves of strange ice and fire energy flowed out as an explosive sound was emitted in the air. It was quite ear-piercing and frightening. The Hall of Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace has opened. All of you should follow the chains on your respective peaks and approach the Hall of Ice and Fire. Those who are not strong enough should know their limits and give up as soon as possible. Otherwise, it will be too late for regrets. Yang Ji's voice once again sounded. His tone had become extremely cautious. Soon after, it gradually became quiet. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Many rushing air sounds resounded over the 9 peaks not long after Yang Ji's words sounded. Soon after, countless number of core disciples rushed out from the 9 peaks. They followed the chains on their respective peaks and approached the Ice-Fire Dual Pole Hall in the middle. They were densely packed like locusts. At Ao Yuan Peak, Lu Qing smiled and said to Zhuowen beside him, "Junior brother Zhuowen, let's also set off." Zhuowen nodded. However, his eyes landed on Capital Sky Peak. A beautiful figure was standing there. Her eyes also landed on Ao Yuan Peak. The moment Zhuowen's eyes turned over, they coincidentally met with a pair of beautiful eyes. The two of them looked at each other and smiled. He saw Mu Chunshue's lips wiggle. The corners of Zhuowen's mouth revealed an arc. He naturally understood the meaning behind her lips. Do your best. Be careful. Do your best too. Be careful. Zhuowen muttered in his mouth. Soon after, his eyes landed on the Hall of Ice and Fire. He had a feeling that he might be able to undergo some kind of transformation after entering the Hall of Ice and Fire. Swoosh. Lu Qing stomped her foot and leaped onto the thick chains that connected the Hall of Ice and Fire on Ao Yuan Peak. She took the lead and rushed towards the Hall of Ice and Fire. Zhuowen followed closely behind. However, the moment his feet landed on the chains, a powerful ice and fire energy spread from the chains and spread around his body. This caused Zhuowen to feel uncomfortable all over. It's really not an ordinary ice and fire energy. Zhuowen's pupils shrank. His body trembled. The immortal energy in his body circulated, and the ice and fire energy that invaded his body was immediately expelled by Zhuowen. The moment Zhuowen stepped on the chains, Mu Chunxue also set off from Capital Sky Peak. Jian Mu followed closely behind, following closely behind Mu Chunxue. As for Feng Nianlan, she was currently entangled with Yang Yi. This Yang Yi was too lazy. He was still lying on the ground and sleeping. Feng Nianlan stomped her feet in anger. "Senior brother, I don't care about you anymore. I'm leaving first." Feng Nianlan could be considered to have lost her temper because of Yang Yi. She stomped her feet and flew out, also rushing towards the Hall of Ice and Fire. Above the clouds, everyone stared at Old Man Tian Du with a strange expression. They naturally also saw Yang Yi, who was still sleeping soundly. Old Man Tian Du smiled awkwardly and said, "That brat Yang Yi has such a character. Everyone, please forgive him. He will catch up later." As he spoke, Old Man Tian Du cursed in his heart. Yesterday, he had clearly told Yang Yi to pay attention to this opportunity of entering the Hall of Ice and Fire. It seemed that this brat had completely turned a deaf ear to his words. He had painstakingly said a lot of things yesterday. It was really a waste of breath. On the chains, Zhuowen stepped forward step by step. He found that as he approached the Hall of Ice and Fire, the ice and fire energy became more and more terrifying. Even Zhuowen had to treat it with caution. Zhuowen even saw that the core disciples of the other main peaks who had rushed out first had generally slowed down after reaching half the distance of the chains. Some of them even half-squatted on the spot, not daring to move. Cold sweat trickled down their foreheads. Obviously, the strength of the ice and fire energy above had exceeded the range that these disciples could withstand. When they reached 2/3 of the chains, some of the disciples had already stopped moving forward and retreated to the main peaks they were on. As time passed, the number of disciples who retreated gradually increased. Zhuowen originally only had a dozen or so Ao Yuan peak disciples on the chains. At this moment, only he and Lu Qing were still on the chains, approaching the Hall of Ice and Fire. Someone has reached the gate of the Hall of Ice and Fire first. Suddenly, a cry of surprise rang out, immediately attracting the attention of everyone on the chains. Everyone's eyes fell on the gate of the Hall of Ice and Fire, where a tall and sturdy young man with bluish-black skin stood quietly. It's the eldest direct disciple of the divine devil peak, Fu Yu. As expected, he has reached the Hall of Ice and Fire first. Soon, someone recognized the young man, and an uproar broke out in the surroundings. Fu Yu frowned slightly. His sharp gaze fell in the direction of Sky Capital Peak. Then, he saw Yang Yi, who was still sleeping soundly on the ground. Black lines appeared on his forehead. What an arrogant fellow. Yang Yi, if you don't leave now, you will regret it later. Fu Yu coldly snorted. His voice was like 9 heavenly thunder, exploding in the air. Soon after, Fu Yu leaped into the Hall of Ice and Fire. Oh my God! Yang Yi has not left yet. Isn't he too arrogant? No, that Yang Yi seems to be sleeping. Is it my imagination? He is sleeping at such an important time. The group was speechless. It was as if 1,000 alpacas were galloping in their hearts. The opening of the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace was an unprecedented grand occasion in the entire inner yard. Yet, Yang Yi was actually sleeping at such a time. Moreover, he was sleeping openly under the watchful eyes of so many people in the open air. Zhuowen's gaze also fell on Yang Yi, who was leaning against the Sky Capital Peak square. A strange look appeared in his eyes. This heaven's pride of the inner academy, who was praised by Xiao Yu, had a strange character. Above the clouds, old man Tianju wanted to cry but had no tears. He had just said that the first place in the Hall of Ice and Fire would undoubtedly be Yang Yi. But now, Yang Yi had ruthlessly slapped his face. Old man Tianju felt extremely helpless in his heart. With Fu Yu as an example, the following cultivators also arrived at the entrance of the Hall of Ice and Fire. However, the first to arrive were the direct disciples of the various peaks. Jian Mu, Ding Xinghua, Xu Lingping, Xian Kai, Yuan Wanhe and Mu Chunxue also successfully arrived at the entrance. After arriving at the entrance, they rushed into the Hall of Ice and Fire without stopping. Lu Qing was the 15th to arrive at the Hall of Ice and Fire, while Zhuowen followed closely behind, arriving at the 16th. Zhuowen, the Hall of Ice and Fire contains a universe. Every level has a huge space. Entering is random, and the ice and fire energy inside is extremely powerful. You must be careful. Moreover, the ice and fire energy will become more terrifying as the number of levels increases. If you can't endure it, don't persist. It's best to immediately leave the Hall of Ice and Fire. Lu Qing cautiously instructed before stepping into the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall. The Hall of Ice and Fire, I'm finally going to enter. I wonder if the symbol spirit still remembers the promise of 10 years. Zhuowen muttered in a low voice. He also stepped into the Hall of Ice and Fire, disappearing at the entrance. Chapter 1367. Equilibrium point. With that, Yang Yi took a step forward and landed on the chain as if he had teleported. Under the dumbfounded gazes of many disciples, it only took him 10 breaths to reach the entrance of the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace. His speed was much faster than Fu Yu's. So fast, everyone stared blankly at Yang Yi, who had stepped into the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace, unable to speak for a long time. This Yang Yi is so fast, and I don't think I've ever seen this guy display his full strength, right? Tiandu, I wonder how strong Yang Yi is now? Above the clouds, Yang Ji nodded in admiration. The others also stared curiously at Tiandu. Yang Yi was very famous in the Nine Netherrealm, but this guy was very low-key and had an extremely lazy personality, so he had never shown his true strength. Old man Tian Du smiled bitterly. Actually, I'm not too sure. I only know that this guy has become an invincible emperor lord a long time ago. As for what law he comprehended, he didn't even tell me, nor did he show it.
Oh,
he didn't even tell you? Why is this little guy so secretive? From my point of view, this little guy should have reached the quasi-holy realm, but as for what law he comprehended, I can't tell at the moment, Yang Ji said with a smile. Old man Tian Du smiled helplessly. No matter what Yang Yi did, he wouldn't tell him, his master, about it. He didn't even tell him about his breakthrough, which made him feel very helpless. Ari. With this little brat's talent, his strength should surpass mine. I just don't know how strong he is. Old man Tian Du smiled happily. Although he was very unhappy with Yang Yi's methods, the latter was still his direct disciple. He was naturally gratified to see his disciple achieve so much. The space within the twin extremes of Ice and Fire Palace was very large. The place where Zhuo Wen appeared was a huge hall of the palace. The floor of this hall was paved with white marble, and there were thick stone pillars around it. The left side of these stone pillars was fiery red and emitted boiling hot air, while the right side was icy blue and filled with cold air. In the middle of these stone pillars was a long path. The ground of this path was alternating between red and blue, and the eruption of ice and fire energy was very intense. Zhuowen found that there were many similar paths in the surroundings, and each path corresponded to a disciple. Zhuowen could even see two other figures on the left and right side of the path. These two figures were also wearing the uniform of the Inner Academy. However, Zhuo Wen did not recognize them. They should be the core disciples of the other main peaks. Looks like this path is path. I wonder what's at the end of this path. Zhuowen Emperor Lord of Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace of Ice and Fire Dual Polarity of Ice and Fire Dual Divine Ice Dual. 9 Nether 9 Ice Dual Polarity, Divine Emperor Yang, Yang, Yang Yi, Yang, Divine, Yang, Divine, Yang, 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 Divine. Although Zhuowen had relied on the Ice-Fire Holy symbol to fuse the Ice-Fire Holy symbol before, he did not understand the principle behind the fusion of the two types of energy. Instead, he had relied on the Ice-Fire Holy symbol to forcefully fuse them together. Now, after Zhuowen entered the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Palace, he discovered that the ice and fire energies were perfectly combined. There were no explosive fluctuations, and everything was extremely harmonious. Furthermore, Zhuowen could faintly sense that the ice and fire energy in the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall was much more powerful than the Ice and Fire Lotus that Zhuowen had fused with back then. How did the Ice and Fire Dual Extremes Palace do this? A sliver of thought appeared in Zhuo Wen's eyes. At this moment, he stopped and stared at the ground that had been condensed from ice and fire energy. He seemed to be frozen in place. Above the clouds, Yang Ji, Jiang Xian, Wen Bai and the 9 peak masters were seated around a round table. Many specks of light appeared on the round table. Each speck of light had its own name, representing the identity of the disciple who had entered the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall. Fu Yu's speed is pretty good. He's far ahead and has already entered the 2nd floor. He's not far from the 3rd floor. Lu Yuanhua was in a good mood and could not help but laugh. Lu Yuanhua, look again. Fu Yu is now 2nd. He was just surpassed by Yang Yi. Old man Tianju smiled. His face was full of pride. Lu Yuanhua's face immediately stiffened. He lowered his head and saw that Fu Yu's speck of light was ranked 2nd. His face could not help but turn ugly. The direct disciples of the main peaks are now far ahead of the other core disciples, Yang Ji said with a smile. Everyone nodded. The round table would automatically display the rankings. The top 20 were basically occupied by the direct disciples. The top 5 were Yang Yi, Fu Yu, Jian Mu, Ding Xinghua and Xu Lingping. Xian Kai was ranked 6th. After Xian Kai was Mu Chunxue. Mu Chunshue's performance had caught the attention of the peak masters at the round table. Mu Chunxue had just become a direct disciple and had successfully cultivated the heavenly inquiring ancient scripture. Moreover, her cultivation had leaped to the high-level emperor realm. Her talent could be said to be extremely outstanding. Now, She had entered the top 10 in the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall. This was something that the Peak Masters had not expected. The Sky Capital Peak is doing well. Yang Yi is first, Jian Mu is third, Mu Chunxue is 7th and Feng Nianlan is 10th. After entering the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall, all 4 of your direct disciples have entered the top 10, Yang Ji said with a smile. Old man Tianju waved his hand and said, "It's just the beginning. Whether they can maintain the top 10 is still unknown." Martial Uncle Yang Ji, you're wrong. Not all of the direct disciples are far ahead. I see that there's still one direct disciple at the bottom. All of a sudden, an ambiguous voice rang out. Xian Zhong glanced at Xiao Yu meaningfully and chuckled mischievously. Everyone was stunned. Immediately, their eyes fell on the round table. Then, they saw that at the very end, there was an extremely familiar light spot. This light spot was called Zhuowen. Ao Yuan Peak's direct disciple Zhuowen? Why did this kid stop at the first level, not moving at all? On the round table, the others were discussing spiritedly. Xiao Yu's face was extremely gloomy. He glared at Xian Zhong fiercely and frowned. He had already noticed Zhuowen's abnormality. After entering the first level, this kid stopped moving forward. Now, he was far behind the others and was ranked last. Yang Ji, Jiang Xian, and Wenbai also looked at the motionless light spot that represented Zhuowen in surprise. Their eyes flickered. The 3 of them had seen Zhuowen's strength. It should be no problem for this kid to reach the first 5 levels. Now that he stopped at the first level, it was indeed a little strange. On the first level, Zhuowen sat silently on the path, thinking about the principle of the perfect combination of ice and fire energy contained in the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall. The ice and fire energy on this level is not strong enough. I have to go up and try. Muttering softly, Zhuowen continued to walk forward. At the end of the path was a flight of stairs. Zhuowen stepped on the stairs and entered the second level. The scenery on the second level was not much different from the first level. The only difference was that the ice and fire energy on the second level was much stronger than the first level. Zhuowen silently experienced the ice and fire energy and once again fell into deep thought. 1 day later, Zhuowen entered the third level. 3 days later, he entered the fourth level. 5 days later, he entered the fifth level. When Zhuowen arrived at the sixth level, he could clearly feel that the surrounding ice and fire energy had become much more violent. It was as if the ice and fire energy had undergone a qualitative change at this moment. Its power had increased by more than just a little. The ice and fire energy has increased so much, yet I can still perfectly combine these 2 extreme energies without losing control and exploding. I have to find a balance between the 2 energies. As long as I can find a balance between the 2 energies, then no matter how powerful the ice and fire energy is, they can be perfectly combined and create a perfect and powerful new energy. Zhuowen muttered to himself. Afterward, the karmic flames of 9 flames appeared in his right hand, and the dark frost poison appeared in his left hand. Under Zhuowen's control, the 2 extreme energies slowly fused together. Ci. Wisps of sparks burst out from the point of contact between the 2 types of energy, and there was also a slight muffled sound of sparks exploding. Balance. We have to find the balance between these 2 types of energy, Zhuowen muttered to himself with a serious look in his eyes. The dark cold poison and the 9 flames karmic fire finally fused together. Then, Zhuowen frowned because he didn't feel the balance between the 2 during the process of fusion. Not good. At the same time, an extremely berserk energy erupted from Zhuowen's hands. This energy was too terrifying, causing Zhuowen's soul to tremble. He immediately threw out the energy in his hands. Rumble. In the vast hall, the new energy formed by the combination of the dark cold poison and the 9 flames karmic fire suddenly exploded. The aftermath of the explosion spread in all directions. Zhuowen involuntarily retreated under the aftermath. His eyebrows were tightly knitted together. The ice and fire energy that he had combined was still so unstable. If he was careless, it would explode. It was very difficult to control. How can I find the balance point? Zhuowen softly muttered and fell into deep thought. The entire ice and fire dual extreme hall shook a little due to the explosion. This caused the other disciples, who were still advancing in the hall, to reveal a surprised expression and halt their footsteps. Even the direct disciples, who were far ahead of the core disciples, paused their footsteps because of this. However, this pause didn't last for long. The many disciples in the hall continued to advance in an orderly manner. In the depths of the 18th floor of the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall, there was a sealed cage. Within this cage floated a talisman that was alternating between red and blue. Chapter 1368. Xian Kai. When the entire Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace shook, the talisman in the cage suddenly trembled and emitted a buzzing sound. I can sense the trace of origin energy that I purposely released. That young man has come to the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace. He has come to keep his promise. An ancient voice rang out from the cage. The talisman floating in the middle of the cage started to tremble like a human, as if it was filled with excitement. Young man, as long as you can reach the 8th floor, I will be able to pull you to the 18th floor. I will give you endless benefits as long as you do not disappoint me. The distant voice rang out from the bottom of the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace. It spread upwards, passing through layer after layer of barriers, and reached the 6th floor where Zhuowen was. This is the talisman spirit's voice? Zhuowen, who was on the 6th floor, turned serious. The Ice and Fire Saint talisman on the back of his hands flickered, and the talisman spirit's voice rang out in his ears. Kid, do you plan to enter the 8th floor immediately? Xiaohei suddenly asked. Zhuowen shook his head and said, let's wait a little longer. I need to understand the law of the fusion of ice and fire energy. I feel that I am not far from the equilibrium point of the fusion of ice and fire energy. I just need a little more time. Then you should enter the 7th floor. The ice and fire energy there should be able to give you more inspiration, Xiaohei said indifferently. Zhuowen nodded when he heard this. He walked along the path of ice and fire step by step. When he reached the end, he stepped onto the stairs and ascended to the 7th floor. The scenery on the 7th floor is different from the 6th floor. When he entered the 7th floor, Zhuowen's eyes revealed a startled expression because the scene on the 7th floor was no longer a large hall surrounded by stone pillars of fire and ice, but a long bridge. The surface of the long bridge was covered in pure white snow, and below the bridge was a sea of lava. At the end of the bridge, ice and lava intersected, forming an arc of ice and fire. It looked exceptionally strange. The ice and fire energy here is much stronger than on the 6th floor. Zhuowen muttered in a low voice as he walked towards the end of the long bridge. As he walked, the ice and snow above the bridge drifted and gathered into a terrifying snowstorm. The lava under the bridge raged and turned into a fire dragon that was thousands of feet long. The snowstorm and fire dragon roared at the same time, sandwiching Zhuowen in the middle. Ice and fire intertwined, producing a terrifying energy that crushed Zhuowen's body, causing Zhuowen's body to freeze and his speed to slow down. This ice and fire energy even began to corrode Zhuowen's body. Zhuowen furrowed his brows. With a wave of his sleeve, he summoned the 4-kill array, which revolved around his body. Immediately, the ice and fire energies that were squeezing towards him were blocked by the 4-kill array, unable to get close to Zhuowen. Zhuowen's footsteps did not change as he strode forward. Soon, he arrived at the end of the long bridge. Quietly staring at the arc formed by the fusion of ice and fire, Zhuowen revealed a thoughtful look. This arc has a good balance between the ice and fire energies. Zhuowen muttered softly. His eyes flickered with light. Then, he sat down cross-legged on the ground and stared at the arc of ice and fire energy in front of him. Zhuowen did not compete for the ranking. Ever since he entered the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace, the ranking did not mean much to him. Because what he wanted was not what the ranking could give him. After all, what he wanted was the core of the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace, the main body of the Ice and Fire Sacred Symbol. Yang Yi has arrived at the 13th floor. His speed is too fast. This guy doesn't seem to be hindered by the ice and fire energies. Above the clouds, the people sitting around the round table burst into an uproar. This time, Yang Yi was far ahead of the others. The second place, Fu Yu, was only on the 11th floor, and his speed was constantly decreasing. Perhaps his limit was the 12th floor. Jianmu and Ding Xinghua were on the 10th floor, 3rd and 4th respectively. There were 4 people on the 9th floor. Among them, Xu Lingping of the Hidden Sword Peak, Xian Kai of the Mysterious Underworld Peak, and Mu Chenxue of the Sky Capital Peak were all on the 9th floor. The 4th person was a girl named Gatha. This name was extremely unfamiliar to the people at the round table. They had never heard of this disciple before. Shi Tianhua, this Gatha is from your Great Void Peak. Is she your new direct disciple? Old man Tianju asked Shi Tianhua, who was dressed as a Taoist priest. Shi Tianhua smiled and said, I'm not talented. I just accepted her as a direct disciple half a year ago. A direct disciple accepted half a year ago can actually reach the 9th floor of the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace. Isn't this speed a little too fast? Shi Tianhua, it seems that you have accepted a good disciple. Her talent is almost on par with Mu Chenxue of the Sky Capital Peak. She might even surpass her master. At the round table, everyone's focus was suddenly on Gatha. Shi Tianhua, who was originally calm, could not help but smile. There was a trace of pride in his smile. Gatha's talent was even stronger than Ding Xinghua of the Great Void Peak. It was only a matter of time before she surpassed Ding Xinghua. Shi Tianhua was extremely glad that he had wandered around the bottom of the 9 peaks and found Gatha, this beautiful jade. He knew that as Gatha's cultivation increased in the future, she would definitely shine in the inner yard and even the 9th netherworld realm. While everyone was discussing, Xiaoyu was dejected. The 2 direct disciples of Ao Yuan Peak, Zhuowen and Lu Qing, were behind the others. Lu Qing was still on the 8th floor, and Zhuowen was on the 7th floor. There was a big gap between them and the previous ones. Damn it, it seems that Ao Yuan Peak is going to be ranked last again. I'm afraid that those old guys will mock and ridicule us. Xiaoyu cursed in a low voice and sighed in his heart. However, he did not blame Zhuowen. Zhuowen had joined Ao Yuan Peak for too short a time. Even if he had the strength to kill an 8th-level Emperor Realm expert, there was still a gap between him and the top geniuses of the other main peaks. However, Xiaoyu believed that if Zhuowen was given enough time, he would naturally be able to catch up with the other direct disciples of the main peaks. As for Lu Qing, although he was considered a genius, he was only average compared to the other direct disciples. Xiaoyu did not think that Lu Qing would be able to surprise him. Since the 2 direct disciples were the kind that could not be helped, Xiaoyu's mood was very bad. The 9th floor was a huge platform. There was a scorching sun and snowstorm on the platform. The energy of ice and fire filled the air. If one accidentally breathed it into his lungs would be damaged. Xu Lingping, who had a small sword on her waist, walked in front silently. Behind her was Xian Kai, followed by Mu Chenxue, and lastly, Gatha. Mu Chenxue turned her head and looked at Gatha. Her beautiful eyes were filled with surprise. She naturally knew Gatha. She was the girl who had entered the inner courtyard with Zhuowen. This girl was the younger sister of the impulsive and reckless Jianan. Mu Chenxue did not pay much attention to this girl at that time. However, she had to be cautious now. At this moment, Gatha's cultivation was around the 4th level of the Emperor Realm. However, she was able to rely on her own strength to reach the 9th floor. This result had already surpassed most of the disciples in the inner courtyard. When she was about 10 meters away from Mu Chenxue, Gatha stopped. Her face was slightly pale. She sat down cross-legged and did not plan to go any further. Perhaps because she noticed Mu Chenxue looking at her, Gatha raised her head and smiled brightly at Mu Chenxue. She said, "Sister-in-law, you have to do your best." Mu Chenxue was stunned. Soon after, a warm smile appeared on her face. She nodded and said, "Thank you, Gatha. If you work harder, you might be able to reach the 10th floor." Gatha shook her head and said, "The 9th floor is my limit. It is unlikely that I will be able to reach the 10th floor. Sister-in-law, you should be able to do it. You overestimate yourself. How can a mere 7th level of the Emperor Realm reach the 10th floor?" Suddenly, a sinister voice rang out, causing Mu Chenxue to frown as she stared at the ruler in front of her. Noticing Mu Chenxue's gaze, Xian Kai licked his lips and laughed. I heard that you are that bastard Zhuowen's lover. What a waste. A beautiful flower stuck in cow dung. Shut your dog mouth, said Mu Chunxue coldly. Xian Kai's face darkened. He said coldly, what did you just say? Do you dare say it again? I said shut your dog mouth. You are not qualified to comment on Zhuowen, said Mu Chunxue coldly. The veins on Xian Kai's forehead bulged. He said, I am not qualified to comment on Zhuowen. Do you really think that he can be compared to me just because he killed an 8th level Emperor Realm piece of trash? If I was in front of him, I would be able to kill him with a single finger. You can kill an 8th level Emperor Realm expert as a 3rd level Emperor Realm expert? Said Mu Chunxue suddenly. Xian Kai was stunned. It was difficult for a 3rd level Emperor Realm expert to kill an 8th level Emperor Realm expert. Now that he was a 9th level Emperor Realm expert, killing an 8th level Emperor Realm expert was like killing a dog. However, if he was in the 3rd level Emperor Realm, he wouldn't be able to kill an 8th level Emperor Realm expert no matter what. That's because Zhuowen is lucky. He has an extremely powerful armor soul in his body. Without that armor soul, he's nothing, retorted Xian Kai coldly. So the dignified first personal disciple of the profound underworld peak, Xian Kai, can also deny it. I have seen it today, said Mu Chunxue mockingly. You're courting death. Don't think that I won't dare to touch you just because you're a personal disciple of the profound underworld peak. Xian Kai took a step forward. A terrifying aura flowed out. He continued, today, I will teach you a lesson in the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace. When we get out, I will personally teach that trash, Zhuowen, a lesson. As he spoke, Xian Kai leaped into the air, and with a powerful 1,000-pound fall, he flew towards Mu Chunxue. Chilling aura surged from Xian Kai's hand as it transformed into an icy long sword. Chapter 1369. Level 8-inch Be careful. Gatha, who was standing behind Mu Chunxue, exclaimed. She wanted to help, but she was powerless. She was only a level 4 emperor. She had reached the limit of the 9th level. She did not have any energy left to help Mu Chunxue. Mu Chunxue did not panic. She took out a bead from her spiritual ring. The surface of the bead was filled with a chilling aura. The aura was surrounded by the chilling power of the law of yin. Boom! Xian Kai's ice and snow longsword followed, ruthlessly slashing at Mu Chunxue. However, the latter raised her jade-like hand and held the bead horizontally in front of her. A cold power of law intertwined in front of her, repelling Xian Kai's attack. Shenming bead. Xian Kai's eyes narrowed when the ice longsword was deflected. He could not help but exclaim. His face turned ghastly pale. Mu Chunxue waved her hand. The law of Shenming in the Shenming bead turned into black ropes and shot toward Xian Kai. Damn it. Xian Kai twisted his waist and retreated. At the same time, he constantly swung the sword in his hand, blocking the ropes formed from the laws of mysterious underworld in an extremely miserable manner. With a grunt, Xian Kai's chest showed an opening. A black rope shot out and hit his chest. Xian Kai spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground. Mu Chunxue's eyes were filled with killing intent. She waved her hand again. The law of Shenming was relentless. It was like a black python that attacked Xian Kai again. Xian Kai's face changed. He pushed against the ground with his right hand and pulled out the giant ruler from his back. He swung it. A chilling energy shot out of the giant ruler and formed a terrifying yin storm. Boom! 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 The yin storm and the law of Shenming clashed. Xian Kai's eyes twitched when he realized that the yin storm did not last long. It was broken by the law of Shenming and continued to rush toward him. Bastard, that Zhuowen actually gave the Shenming orb to you. Damn it! Xian Kai retreated again and could not help but curse loudly. This mysterious nether orb was originally a protective item that Xian Zhong had intended to give to him. He did not expect that he would be forced to give it to Zhuowen. He also did not expect that Zhuowen would give such a precious item to Mu Chunxue. After all, the law of mysterious underworld was a powerful treasure condensed by a half-saint using the power of law. It contained a part of Xian Zhong's power. His Xian ruler was only at the 9th level of the monarch realm and had yet to comprehend the power of law. Naturally, it was no match for the law of mysterious underworld. "You're going too far," Xian Kai roared angrily, and the center of his brows shone brightly. Then, a giant ice giant appeared in front of him. The snow giant's entire body was covered in sparkling and translucent ice. At first glance, it looked as if it was wearing an armor of ice and snow. It was extremely mighty and extraordinary. Rumble. The snow giant suddenly punched out, and a terrifying power erupted. It actually repelled the law of mysterious underworld. At the same time, Xian Kai leaped onto the snow giant and retreated continuously, out of the attack range of the mysterious nether orb. Mu Chunxue frowned slightly, but did not continue to pursue. Xian Kai was the eldest direct disciple of the mysterious nether peak, and the snow giant should be the soul of his armor. Its power was extremely terrifying as it could repel the law of mysterious underworld's attack. Moreover, the law of mysterious underworld in the mysterious nether orb would not last forever. It would be depleted every time it was used. After all, when Xian Zhong refined it, he had injected his own law of mysterious underworld into the orb. It could not be used indefinitely, so Mu Chunxue would not waste it. Relying on the mysterious nether orb, what kind of ability is that? Moreover, this mysterious nether orb was originally given to me by my master. You and that bastard Zhuoan schemed and stole it. Despicable and shameless. You should return it to me, Xian Kai said coldly. Mu Chunxue's beautiful eyes were filled with indifference. She did not reply, but waved her jade-like hand. The law of mysterious underworld from the mysterious nether orb once again turned into a huge black python. The black python's pair of extremely cold eyes stared at Xian Kai, causing the latter to feel a chill down his spine. His heart trembled slightly. You really don't know your place. Next time, I will make you hand over the mysterious nether orb voluntarily. Xian Kai said ruthlessly and walked towards the front of the platform embarrassedly. His speed was much faster, as if he was afraid that Mu Chunxue would catch up with him. You are bluffing. You are far inferior to Zhuoan, Mu Chunxue said indifferently. As soon as she said that, Xian Kai, who was in front of her, stopped. However, he did not reply and continued to walk forward, ignoring Mu Chunxue. Xu Lingping, who was in the front, had already reached the edge of the platform. There was a staircase at the edge. Her eyes were extremely calm. She took a step forward and disappeared from the platform. Damn it. The battle with Mu Chunxue just now has consumed too much of my energy. When he was about 10 meters away from the staircase, Xian Kai stopped. His chest was heaving up and down. It was obvious that he had reached his limit. Xian Kai's eyes flickered. In the end, he sat down cross-legged and stopped moving forward. Mu Chunxue reached the center of the platform and stopped. She shook her head slightly, knowing that she had also reached her limit. She followed Xian Kai's example and sat down on the same spot. She began to absorb the surrounding ice and fire energy to refine the meridians in her body. Why is Zhuoan not here yet? While she was cultivating, Mu Chunxue could not help but think of Zhuoan. Based on her understanding of Zhuoan, the latter's strength was definitely not weaker than hers. In fact, he might even be stronger than her. It should be more than enough for him to reach the 9th level. On the 7th level, Zhuoan was still sitting cross-legged in front of the circular arc. His expression was extremely focused. His eyes were almost blurred as if he was in a daze. Perhaps the so-called balance point does not exist. Previously, when I merged the ice and fire energy using the human-grade energy, it was in the shape of a sphere. When I merged the earth-grade energy, it was in the shape of a lotus. However, these two forms can only maintain a temporary stability. After a long time, the ice and fire energy will still explode. If I merge the two types of energy into an extremely stable form, does it mean that the ice and fire energy will not go berserk? Instead, I will be able to control them as I wish. Zhuoan muttered softly. Based on his previous experience of merging the ice and fire energy, a look of understanding gradually appeared in his eyes. However, what kind of form can completely stabilize the ice and fire energy? Zhuoan's eyes were filled with confusion. His gaze fell on the surroundings as he softly said, How can the ice and fire energy in the ice and fire dual polarity palace merge together so harmoniously? Could it be? Suddenly, a look of understanding appeared in Zhuowen's eyes. Soon after, the 9 flames karmic fire and the dark cold poison appeared in his hands again. At the same time, his mental energy in his Niwen palace controlled the form of the 2 types of energy. Under the control of his mental energy, the 9 flames karmic fire in his right hand turned into half a palace, while the dark cold poison in his left hand turned into half a palace. Afterwards, Zhuowen slowly merged the 2 types of energy. In the end, they formed a complete palace. The shape of the palace was the same as the ice and fire dual polarity palace. As expected, the structure of the ice and fire dual polarity palace can actually allow the berserk ice and fire energy to exist harmoniously. A smile appeared on Zhuowen's lips. Furthermore, the smile became wider and wider. In the end, he laughed heartily at the sky. He had finally completely merged the 9 flames karmic fire and the dark cold poison. Furthermore, the energy that had been merged this time was completely under his control. In Zhuowen's palm, a small ice and fire dual polarity palace bloomed with the radiance of ice and fire. The 9 colors constantly alternated, accompanied by a chilling black color. This unconventional ice and fire dual polarity palace appeared very mysterious. Kid, you're amazing. You actually managed to completely merge the 9 flames karmic fire and the dark cold poison by yourself. Xiao He could not help but exclaim in his mind. This was because Zhuowen did not use the ice and fire holy talisman in his hands to merge the 2 types of energy. Instead, he used his mental energy as a mediator to merge the 2 types of energy into the ice and fire dual polarity palace. Zhuowen was stunned. Only now did he realize that when he merged the dark cold poison and the 9 flames karmic fire earlier, he had surprisingly not used the ice and fire holy talisman's control. Instead, he had completely merged the 2 types of powerful energy by himself. This. Zhuowen muttered to himself in disbelief. Haha. You're right. The ice and fire dual polarity palace is the most stable structure. It can carry the energy of ice and fire at the same time without causing an explosion. Speaking of which, the guy who built the ice and fire dual polarity palace back then was really amazing to be able to comprehend such a stable structure and suppress the ice and fire holy talisman. Xiao He could not help but nod. Her tone was full of admiration for the creator of the ice and fire dual polarity palace. It's really amazing. Zhuowen also nodded. If he had not been inspired by the ice and fire dual polarity palace, he would never have thought of using such a form to stabilize the energy of ice and fire. Since I can merge the energy of ice and fire, does it mean that the ice and fire holy talisman will not be of much use to me in the future? Zhuowen asked with a frown. Xiao He shook her head and said, the ice and fire holy talisman is a treasure of heaven and earth. To tell you the truth, there are both the law of ice and the law of fire in the ice and fire holy talisman. If you have the real body of the holy talisman, you will be able to easily control the power of these 2 laws without needing to comprehend them. In other words, if you have the ice and fire holy talisman now, you will have the battle strength of an unrivaled emperor lord. Even an ordinary sage-to-be may not be your match. Of course, if you really advance to a saint, you will be able to completely control the power of the holy talisman. At that time, the power you will be able to display will be the most terrifying. Hiss. Hearing this, Zhuowen could not help but gasp. He did not expect the real body of the ice and fire holy talisman to be so powerful. If he had it, he would be able to directly control the 2 laws of ice and fire. Even if he was only a 5th-level emperor realm now, with the ice and fire holy talisman, he would have the battle strength of an unrivaled emperor lord. After recovering from the shock, Zhuowen's eyes were filled with passion. Zhuowen was even more eager to obtain such an item. Let's go to the 8th floor. Chapter 1370. Ice and Fire Dragon. The only thing on the 8th level was a mountain. The top of the mountain was covered with snow, while the bottom was filled with blazing flames. It was like a combination of ice and fire. Climb to the top of the ice and fire mountain range. The moment Zhuowen entered the 8th level, a deep voice rang in his ears. It was the talisman spirit's voice. Zhuowen did not answer. He stepped forward and climbed to the top of the ice and fire mountain range. With Zhuowen's current strength, it was not difficult for him to climb to the top of the ice and fire mountain range. After about an hour, Zhuowen stood at the top of the ice and fire mountain range. Zhuowen looked into the distance and found that the ice and fire mountain range was surrounded by a pitch-black space. He could not see what was hidden in this pitch-black space. "I've reached the top of the mountain." Zhuowen stood at the top of the mountain and shouted. His voice was like thunder, echoing over the entire mountain range. "Young man, you did not disappoint me. You came to Jioshan College in 10 years and entered the Ice and Fire Dual Pole Palace. I did not expect that a little boy in the Yin Void realm could reach the level 5 Emperor realm in 10 years. You are very talented." A deep and vicissitude voice slowly rang out over the mountain range. It was like an echo that reverberated over the ice and fire mountain range. "Come, follow my guidance and enter the 18th level. Over there, you will be able to obtain my true body, and you will also be able to obtain supreme power." As soon as the voice fell, Zhuowen's pupils shrank. The ice and fire mountain range under his feet shook violently and then collapsed. From the ruins of the mountain range, a huge ice and fire dragon drilled out. The ice and fire dragon was extremely large. Its size was comparable to Xiao Hei's. It had a dragon body that was tens of thousands of feet long. The energy of ice and fire intertwined in its body, and the colors of red and blue were constantly changing. "Young man, follow my guidance." The symbol spirit's voice rang out once again. Zhuowen leaped into the air, and the power of the void filled his feet as he entered the void. In the next instant, he appeared above the head of the ice-fire dragon. The ice and fire dragon's head had 2 dragon horns, one red and the other ice blue. "Awoo!" The huge ice-fire dragon roared at the sky. Immediately, it brought Zhuowen and rushed into the sky. In an instant, it disappeared from the 8th level. A monstrous dragon roar spread across the entire ice and fire dual extreme hall. Gatha, Mu Chunxue and Xian Kai, who were originally seated on the platform on the 9th level, were suddenly woken up. Soon after, the 3 of them were stunned to discover that an enormous ice and fire dragon had appeared in the sky above their heads. "What is this?" Xian Kai was startled and muttered to himself in astonishment. "There's a figure on the dragon head. Is that Big Brother Zhuowen?" Gatha suddenly exclaimed and pointed in the direction of the dragon's head. Mu Chunxue and Xian Kai followed Gatha's finger and saw a figure standing there. Perhaps because he heard Gatha's shout, the figure standing on the dragon's head turned his head to look down, revealing a rather delicate and pretty face. "It's Zhuowen." Mu Chunxue was also pleasantly surprised. She did not expect Zhuowen to summon a huge dragon and rush into the 9th level. Moreover, looking at the speed of the huge ice-fire dragon, it only took an instant for it to reach the end of the 9th level and disappear from the stairs. "So fast." Gatha muttered softly. Xian Kai's face was a little ugly. He did not expect Zhuowen to have also entered the 9th level. Moreover, Zhuowen's speed was so fast. He did not even stop as he stood on the ice-fire giant dragon and directly passed through the 9th level. "Xian Kai, it seems like you are really not as good as Zhuowen," Mu Chunxue said to Xian Kai with a sweet smile. Xian Kai snorted and said, The one who passed through the 9th level is the huge dragon that the brat is sitting on and not his own strength. He is lucky this time. After leaving the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Palace, I will make him reveal his true colors." Mu Chunxue only smiled and did not say anything. She was very clear that it was useless to say anything to Xian Kai, so she was too lazy to say anything. Chen Shui and Gatha are both on the 9th level. It seems like that is their limit. The huge ice-fire dragon was very fast. It only stopped on the 9th level for a moment before it entered the 10th level without slowing down. There were a total of 3 figures on the 10th level. They were Xu Lingping, who had just entered the 10th level from the 9th level, Jian Mu, and Ding Xinghua. When the huge ice-fire dragon barged into the 10th level, it immediately attracted the attention of the 3 people. Xu Lingping and Ding Xinghua were stunned. Jian Mu stared at the figure on the huge ice-fire dragon and muttered in a low voice, "It's actually Zhuowen." That guy is Zhuowen, the direct disciple of Ao Yuan Peak who has recently become famous in the inner court? As soon as Zhenmu finished speaking, Ding Xinghua and Xu Lingping looked at each other with a strange look in their eyes. The two of them had naturally heard of Zhuowen's name. They naturally knew about what happened at Sky Capital Peak more than half a year ago. After all, the people from the Blue Dragon Hall and the battle between the Inner Court's Dean Yangji and Sapphire Shaw's Law clone had shaken the entire Divine Spectre realm. And all of this was related to a disciple called Zhuowen. So many disciples of the Nine Peaks had heard of Zhuowen's name but had never seen his face. On the huge ice-fire dragon, Zhuowen only glanced at Zhenmu and the other two indifferently. The huge ice-fire dragon rushed out and disappeared from the 10th level, entering the 11th level. Damn it, I definitely can't lose to Zhuowen. Zhenmu's eyes were filled with determination. Then, the long sword on his back was unsheathed and turned into a few feet long. He stepped on the long sword and a ruthless law enveloped his body. Zhenmu turned into a sword light and entered the 11th level like a hot knife through butter. Zhenmu still has strength left. What a freak. Ding Xinghua stared blankly at Zhenmu, who had turned into a sword light and disappeared from the 10th level. He was stunned on the spot. When he recalled that he had planned to compete with Zhenmu but was instantly left behind by the latter, he felt a chill in his heart. At the same time, he felt a sense of shame for being deceived. Zhenmu had entered the 10th level with him and hadn't used his full strength at all. It was too despicable. In the sky above the 11th level, Zhuowen, who was standing on the huge ice-fire dragon, seemed to have noticed something. He bent down and immediately saw Zhenmu chasing him on a flying sword. Zhenmu? Looking at Zhenmu, who was chasing him, Zhuowen was speechless. He didn't know that this guy was chasing him like a madman. With the speed of the huge ice-fire dragon, it was impossible for Zhenmu to keep up. At most, Zhenmu wouldn't be able to keep up with him on the 12th level. Therefore, Zhuowen didn't take it to heart. Sure enough, after entering the 12th level, Zhenmu's speed dropped sharply. The terrifying ice-fire energy in the surroundings was like the pressure of the deep sea, pressing down on Zhenmu, causing his body to become heavier. Looking at the huge ice-fire dragon that had disappeared into the 12th level without slowing down, Zhenmu finally stopped. At this moment, his face was pale and there was a trace of unwillingness in his eyes. Am I really not as good as Zhuowen? Zhenmu muttered to himself dejectedly. The ruthlessness in his eyes grew stronger. He needed power, more power. Above the clouds, a group of people sat around a round table. Their gazes were constantly on the light screen on the round table. Xian Kai stopped at the 9th level. Xian Zhong muttered as he frowned. Xian Zhong frowned as he muttered to himself. Obviously, he was not very satisfied with Xian Kai's results. Yang Yi has entered the 16th level. This guy's speed has finally slowed down. I'm afraid the 17th level is his limit. Yang Ji suddenly stared at the first light spot with bright eyes. Old man Tian Du was grinning from ear to ear. In the eyes of the other 8 peak masters, there was a trace of mockery in his smile. It was extremely annoying. It's already amazing to reach the 16th level. In the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace, the limit is the 17th level. The 18th level is the level where the Ice-Fire Saint symbol is located. That is the most terrifying level. Even a half-step saint will probably die there, Wenbai said solemnly. The 18th level is too terrifying. Usually, only the 3 martial granduncles can enter that level. Even the 9 of us can't reach it. Old man Tian Du nodded in agreement. Why did Zhuowen's speed suddenly increase? Great Void Peak Master Shi Tianhua suddenly asked in surprise. His voice was like a stone falling into the water, causing a series of ripples. Everyone's eyes fell on Zhuowen's light spot, and then they all revealed a look of astonishment. Just as Shi Tianhua said, Zhuowen's speed had indeed increased, and it was somewhat unbelievably fast. Zhuowen, who was originally on the 8th level, entered the 9th level in 3 breaths, then the 10th, the 11th, the 12th, and finally the 13th level, where Fu Yu was. He surpassed Fu Yu. Zhuowen has entered the 14th level, and now he's only below Yang Yi. Moreover, Zhuowen's speed doesn't seem to have decreased because of this. Instead, it's maintained the same speed as before. How did he do it? The round table suddenly became quiet. Everyone's eyes were filled with disbelief. They really couldn't imagine how Zhuoan, who was originally at the back, suddenly became so fast, as if he had been injected with hormones. Zhuoan is approaching Yang Yi step by step. This guy, on the 13th level, Fu Yu stared blankly at the icefire dragon that disappeared on the stairs in front of him. His body stiffened. Who is that guy? His speed is so fast that he surpassed me. Fu Yu's expression turned extremely ugly. He had accepted the fact that he was surpassed by Yang Yi previously. However, he was now surpassed by another person. One could imagine how bad his mood was. What made him even more helpless was that Zhuowen was extremely unfamiliar to Fu Yu. This was the first time he had seen the youth. Generally, he would recognize the geniuses in the inner yard, but he had never seen the young man riding the icefire dragon before. Obviously, that young man was not famous in the inner yard. I was surpassed by a nameless person. Damn it. Fu Yu coldly snorted, and destructive power lingered around his body. His muscles began to bulge, and he was filled with the power of a wild beast. Let's go. Chapter 1371. Yang Yi. The 16th level was a vertical flight of stone stairs. The surface of the stone stairs was filled with ice and fire energy. The power produced by this level of ice and fire energy was extremely terrifying. The surrounding air was alternating between hot and cold. The two types of energy intertwined with each other like countless insects. If one was not careful, the ice and fire energy in the air could invade one's acupuncture points and enter one's body, destroying the most important meridians in one's body. If one was not strong enough, an ordinary cultivator would not be able to stay here for long. They would be burned to death by this energy. A figure was lazily lying in the middle of the stone stairs. His eyes were drowsy as he yawned without a care for his image. It's already the 16th level. This ice and fire dual polarity palace is truly extraordinary. The ice and fire energy on the 16th level is terrifying. Fortunately, I have practiced the air-holding skill and do not need to breathe. I will not be corroded by the ice and fire energy here. Yang Yi hugged his head with both hands as he lay on one of the stone stairs. His eyes narrowed as he continued, it's the 16th level. No one should be able to reach here. Even Fu Yu should not be able to. Looks like it was really easy to get first place. Yang Yi shook his head as he spoke. A lonely expression appeared on his face as he said, life is so lonely. It's really boring to always be first place. Why don't I go down and play with Fu Yu? Forget it. It's too tiring to go down. I'll just lie here and sleep for a while. If Fu Yu is not here by the time I wake up, I'll look for him again. After speaking, Yang Yi twisted his body slightly and changed into a better sleeping position. He planned to fall asleep. Swoosh. A wild sonic boom suddenly resounded on the 16th level. Following it was a thunderous dragon roar. Yang Yi, who had originally planned to close his eyes and sleep, twitched his ears. He abruptly stood up and lowered his head. He was stunned to see an enormous ice and fire dragon rushing up the stone steps below. Its speed was so fast that it was shocking to hear. At the same time, a slender figure stood on the enormous dragon's head. This person was Zhuowen. When Zhuowen saw Yang Yi, who was standing at the middle of the stone steps, a strange glint appeared in his eyes. This was already the 16th step. Even Zhuowen felt that the surrounding ice and fire energy was somewhat unbearable. If it weren't for the icefire dragon, Zhuowen believed that with his current strength, it would be difficult for him to enter the 16th floor. However, this person was able to stand on the 16th floor so openly. It was clear how terrifying this person's strength was. The eldest disciple of Sky Capital Peak, number 1 on the divine list, Yang Yi? Zhuowen muttered in a low voice. Naturally, Zhuowen had read the information regarding the personal disciples of the 9 peaks. Among them, the most famous one was Zhuowen. This person's talent was terrifying, and his hobby was sleeping. He basically slept all day, but his cultivation base was breaking through at an extremely fast speed. Everyone in the inner court was shocked. Even old man Tiandu, his master, found it unbelievable. Yang Yi grinned and said, "Not bad, kid. You actually made it to the 16th floor. By the way, what's your name? Zhuowen calmly stared at Zhuowen and said indifferently, Zhuowen. Zhuowen? So your name is Zhuowen. I've seen the battle at Sky Capital Peak. You're pretty strong, able to kill an 8th level emperor as a 3rd level emperor. You're the most talented person I've ever seen. Of course, there's still a gap between you and me. Yang Yi chuckled. He didn't blush at all when bragging about himself. You flatter me. Zhuowen nodded. Immediately, the Icefire Dragon roared and rushed up the stone stairs. In 3 breaths' time, it had reached the middle of the stone stairs where Yang Yi was. Zhuowen, how about we hitch a ride? Yang Yi suddenly smiled. Immediately after, under Zhuowen's astonished gaze, he jumped up and landed on the dragon's back. Roar! Get lost! The Icefire Dragon roared and crazily twisted its huge body. A dull and angry voice came from the dragon's mouth. Yang Yi curled his lips and said, Why are you so stingy? If you can carry Zhuowen, why can't you carry me? Your body is so big, it doesn't make much difference whether I'm there or not. As he spoke, Yang Yi's right hand turned into a claw and grabbed the dragon's body. He actually pried open the scales on the dragon's body and reached in with his other hand. He then pulled out a dragon tendon and held it in his hand. Bastard, how dare you peel my dragon tendon? You're courting death. The Icefire Dragon roared furiously. The terrifying ice and fire energy on the dragon's body gathered together and instantly enveloped Yang Yi. You have quite a temper. Yang Yi's lips curled into a smile. A destructive aura burst out from his right palm. Then, he slammed his palm on the wound that had been there just now. Bang bang bang. Muffled noises resounded from within the dragon's body. Soon after, Zhuowen's expression changed drastically as he discovered that the Icefire Giant Dragon was letting out a sharp roar. Immediately, the tail of the Icefire Giant Dragon began to crumble, causing countless amounts of fresh blood to spray into the air. Boom! The Icefire Dragon's eyes were filled with resentment. The part of the dragon's body where Yang Yi was also exploded. The terrifying explosive energy instantly drowned Yang Yi. At the same time, the Icefire Dragon did not dare to stay here for long. With a twist of its body, it disappeared from the 16th floor. The 17th level was a boundless land. As soon as the Icefire Dragon appeared on the 17th level, it slammed into the ground. Zhuowen, who was originally standing on the dragon's head, released his celestial energy and floated in the air. At this moment, the Icefire Dragon was in a terrible state. Almost half of the dragon's body was covered in blood and flesh. Zhuowen could even see sections of dragon bones amidst the bloody flesh. It was extremely wretched. What terrifying strength! How can Yang Yi be so strong? Zhuowen's eyes flickered. The strength that Yang Yi had just displayed was much stronger than that of Xiao Yu, the peak master of Ao Yuan Peak. Moreover, the attack that Yang Yi had unleashed contained traces of destructive power. Yang Yi has mastered the law of destruction. It seems that he deliberately shot down the Icefire Dragon to stop you from moving forward. Xiao Hei's solemn voice sounded in Zhuowen's mind. The law of destruction. Zhuowen's eyes darkened. The law of destruction was an extremely powerful law. Although it could not be compared to the law of the void, it was much stronger than the ordinary law. Young man, it seems that the Icefire Dragon that I have transformed into won't be of much use. I will inject the energy of the Icefire Dragon into your body so that you can smoothly pass through the 17th floor and reach the 18th floor where I am. The Icefire Dragon, which was prostrating on the ground, stared at Zhuowen and made a dull sound. Then, its huge dragon body began to dissipate, turning into extremely pure Icefire energy and merging with the Icefire Sacred Rune on the back of Zhuowen's hands. Keep moving forward. The dull sound was heard. Then, the Icefire Sacred Rune on Zhuowen's hands bloomed with Icefire energy, turning into an armor of alternating Icefire and Icefire that covered Zhuowen's body. Whoosh! Zhuowen nodded and began to run forward. Zhuowen found that with the Icefire armor on the surface of his body, the Icefire energy around him was almost non-existent. At the entrance of the 17th floor, a lazy figure slowly walked out. Yang Yi looked around and suddenly found Zhuowen running in front of him. A strange look appeared on his face. The Icefire Dragon's aura doesn't seem to belong to Zhuowen. It's more like an energy life form that was born in the Icefire Dual Polarity Palace. But why is this energy life form helping Zhuowen? Yang Yi's eyes showed a trace of seriousness for the first time. After all, Zhuowen's cultivation was only at the 5th Heaven Emperor realm. It was very strange that he could reach the 16th and 17th floor. Could it be that the Icefire Sacred Rune is causing trouble? Yang Yi seemed to have thought of something. He squinted his eyes and then took a step forward, rushing in the direction that Zhuowen was running. Yang Yi is catching up. Naturally, Zhuowen also heard the commotion behind him. From the corner of his eyes, he immediately saw Yang Yi approaching from behind. Junior Zhuowen, looking at you, it seems like something is helping you to reach the deepest part of the Icefire Dual Polarity Palace. Could it be that you have some kind of connection with the Icefire Sacred Rune on the 18th floor? Yang Yi, who was following behind Zhuowen for tens of meters, suddenly said with a smile, causing Zhuowen's pupils to shrink into needles. Senior Yang Yi, I don't understand what you're talking about. Zhuowen turned a deaf ear to him. Huge purple lightning wings appeared on his back. At the same time, a surge of void energy was added to the lightning wings. In an instant, he escaped into the void. The next time he appeared, he was already 100 meters away. The void immortal scripture. But your void energy is still not up to par. You probably haven't fully comprehended the void laws. Your speed is not enough. Yang Yi smiled faintly. His speed instantly increased by a few times. He was still closing the distance between him and Zhuowen. However, when Yang Yi was about to reach Zhuowen, the energy of ice and fire on the 17th floor began to boil and turned into countless icefire giants. Boom! 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 The icefire giants gathered together and attacked Yang Yi. In their eyes, Zhuowen was like air. They completely ignored him. It seems that the Icefire Sacred Rune is helping you. You have to reach the 18th floor before Yang Yi. Xiao Hei's voice rang in Zhuowen's mind. Hearing this, Zhuowen nodded. Haha, it's really the Icefire Sacred Rune. Do you think these can stop me? Yang Yi laughed. There was a trace of excitement in his eyes. He slammed his right hand on the ground. With him as the center, the destruction law spread out. Wherever it passed, the Icefire giants were destroyed. However, there were too many Icefire giants. Even though the destruction law Yang Yi displayed was very powerful, it was difficult to destroy the Icefire giants in a short time. Chapter 1372. The 18th Floor. At the same time, the Icefire Saint Rune on the back of Zhuowen's hands began to emit dazzling light. The two colors, one red and one blue, illuminated Zhuowen's face, making it look quite strange. The 18th floor, raising his head slightly, Zhuowen stared at the 18th floor with a touch of passion in his eyes. He could feel a voice calling him up. He knew that it was the real Icefire Saint Rune. Boy, be careful. The Icefire Saint Rune is very intelligent and has lived much longer than you. Xiao Hei's voice suddenly sounded in Zhuowen's mind. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and became sober. Although he had made a 10-year promise with the rune did not specify why he wanted him to enter the 18th floor. Was it really to let him obtain the real Icefire Saint Rune? Zhuowen was only in the Yin Void realm at that time. He was too weak and full of uncertainty, but the rune chose him. Was it really because he thought highly of him? I know. But I have to go in and take a look. The real Icefire Saint Rune is a treasure of heaven and earth. If I miss this opportunity, I'm afraid I won't have another chance. Zhuowen's eyes were filled with determination. He took a step forward and stepped onto the stairs. The Icefire Saint Rune on the back of his hands emitted an even more dazzling light. Boom! 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 The moment Zhuowen stepped onto the stairs, a terrible explosion came from the 17th floor. Earth explosion and sky rend. An indifferent voice resounded throughout the 17th floor. Then Zhuowen, who was about to step onto the stairs, froze. Immediately, he felt a terrible aura of destruction spread throughout the 17th floor. Next, the countless ice and fire giants formed from ice and fire energy on the 17th floor were annihilated into nothingness by this terrifying destructive power, disappearing without a trace. The terrible air billows, like a monstrous tsunami, spread in all directions. The ear-piercing sound of tearing cloth spread throughout the 17th floor. In the center of the air billows, a figure stood quietly. This person was surrounded by black and red lightning formed by the law of destruction. The lightning was full of a destructive aura. Yang Yi shook his head and said indifferently, "I said that these ice-fire giants can't stop me." After saying this, Yang Yi turned to look at Zhuowen, who was standing stiffly on the stairs to the 18th floor. He grinned and said, "Junior brother Zhuowen, although I don't know why the Ice-Fire Saint Rune is helping you, I'm sure I'm Fire Saint Rune." As he spoke, Yang Yi extended his right hand into the void. The destructive lightning that was dissipating around his body tore through the void and appeared in front of Zhuowen in an instant. Damn it! Zhuowen's rune. Run rune rune was run runes run rune runes. Rumble. The golden feather emitted a blazing golden light and turned into a thick golden barrier in front of Zhuowen. Then, the destructive lightning arrived in an instant and blasted heavily on the golden barrier. Countless arcs of electricity spread out and looked exceptionally terrifying. Go! The moment he blocked the destructive lightning, Zhuowen immediately escaped into the void and teleported to the end of the stairs. He took a step and disappeared from the 17th floor. That golden feather isn't bad. It was actually able to block the lightning formed by my destruction laws. Yang Yi narrowed his eyes. At this moment, he had also reached the bottom of the stairs. Without any hesitation, he stepped onto the stairs and walked up step by step until he reached the end of the stairs. Just as he was about to enter the 18th floor, a terrifying energy of ice and fire surged over, instantly sealing the entrance to the 18th floor. Yang Yi took a few steps back. He was stunned. What was going on? Zhuowen could enter the 18th floor, but he couldn't. Thinking of this, Yang Yi had the urge to curse. This was too unfair. Break for me. Yang Yi snorted coldly. He clenched his right hand and destructive lightning filled it. Then, he punched the entrance to the 18th floor that was sealed by the energy of ice and fire. Rumble. A terrifying explosion resounded. Then, Yang Yi's face turned ugly. The energy of ice and fire that sealed the entrance to the 18th floor was more terrifying and powerful than that of the 17th floor. Even if he used the destruction laws, it was difficult to destroy it. Isn't this Ice-Fire Saint talisman too much? Why is there such a difference in treatment? Yang Yi's eyes widened and he couldn't help but curse. But soon, he frowned slightly. He found that the ice and fire dual polarity palace was too strange today. It seemed to be giving Zhuowen too special treatment. Only the 3 martial granduncles have entered the 18th floor. Even the 9 peak masters have only entered the 17th floor. Is the 18th floor so strange? Yang Yi frowned slightly and muttered in a low voice. He continued, could it be that Zhuowen has some kind of relationship with the Ice-Fire Saint talisman? Otherwise, why would the Ice-Fire Saint talisman be so crazy? Above the clouds, the people gathered around the round table were all dumbfounded as they stared blankly at the light screen on the round table. Zhuowen was like a hot knife through butter. After surpassing Fu Yu, he directly entered the 16th floor and then the 17th floor. During this period, Zhuowen and Yang Yi chased each other. In the end, the light that represented Zhuowen entered the 18th floor, which was the last floor of the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace. Zhuowen has entered the 18th floor. Old man Tianju opened his mouth, but could only utter these words in the end. He had never expected that someone could surpass Yang Yi, nor did he expect that among the disciples of the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace, there would be someone who could enter the 18th floor. In the entire inner courtyard, only the 3 saints, Yang Ji, Jiang Xian and Wen Bai, had entered the 18th floor. None of the 9 peak masters had entered. The expressions of the others were extremely interesting, especially Xian Zhong. At the beginning, he had mocked Zhuowen for being last. Now, Zhuowen's performance was like a slap to his face. Moreover, it was a resounding slap. Haha. Look, Zhuowen is a direct disciple of my mysterious origin peak, a direct disciple taught by this old man. Which dog said that our mysterious origin peak would be ranked last? Hurry up and stand up for me. Xiao Yu laughed heartily, his face full of pride. At the same time, he narrowed his eyes and looked at Xianzhong provocatively. Obviously, Xiao Yu's words were directed at Xianzhong. Xiao Yu, what do you mean? How dare you insult me by calling me a dog? Xianzhong's face turned ugly as he slammed the table and stood up. Xiao Yu's words were really unpleasant and he naturally could not tolerate it. Oh, Xianzhong, I don't think I was talking about you, right? I was just talking about a dog. I was talking about a dog, not a person. Why are you in such a hurry to admit it? It's rare for you to be so self-aware. I am quite pleased. Xiao Yu said sarcastically. Xiao Yu's words were too despicable. Not only Xianzhong, but also the others at the round table almost could not control their hands and wanted to go up and beat him up. You are courting death. Xianzhong shouted angrily. The law of mysterious underworld burst out as he glared at Xiao Yu, as if he was ready to attack at any time. If you want to fight, I will accompany you. Xiao Yu was not to be outdone. The law of fire gushed out and a huge fire python circled around his body. His aura was imposing. Both of you, get some rest. Yang Ji felt a headache coming on as he shouted for them to stop. This caused Xianzhong and Xiao Yu, who had originally intended to fight, to immediately give up, not daring to say anything else. Humph. That Zhuowen must have used some unknown method to enter the 18th floor. If he fights with Shen Kai, he will be defeated immediately. Xianzhong said coldly. Xiao Yu narrowed his eyes and said indifferently, Xianzhong, don't you feel ashamed? Shen Kai is a 9th level emperor and he is about to comprehend the law and become an invincible emperor lord. Zhuowen is only a middle level emperor. How dare you say that you want the two of them to fight? If Zhuowen is also a 9th level emperor, I don't mind letting Zhuowen fight with Shen Kai at that time. Zhuowen will definitely be able to defeat Shen Kai. Xianzhong sneered and said, looking at you, I'm afraid you don't dare to let Zhuowen fight with Shen Kai. Are you planning to let Zhuowen be a coward? Enough, you two. Let's talk after the result of the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace. What's the use of talking now? Yang Ji's face was gloomy and his tone was heavy. Xianzhong and Xiao Yu, who were originally at loggerheads, stopped talking. On the 18th floor, Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes and looked around. He found that the surroundings were pitch black. However, the darkness was quickly broken. In front of Zhuowen, a ray of dim light appeared, like a ghost fire in a graveyard at night. This ray of dim light became brighter and brighter. In the end, it spread out and illuminated an area of dozens of feet, covering where Zhuowen was. That's a talisman. Zhuowen squinted his eyes and immediately saw the true appearance of the unknown object. It was a talisman with strange runes carved on its surface. The runes on the talisman were exactly the same as the Ice-Fire Saint talisman on the back of Zhuowen's hands. Could this be the real body of the Ice-Fire Saint talisman? Zhuowen was surprised. The talisman in front of him was very different from the real body of the Ice-Fire Saint talisman in his imagination. He originally thought that the real body of the Ice-Fire Saint talisman would be filled with extremely terrifying energy of ice and fire. But now, the real body of the Ice-Fire Saint talisman in front of him was ordinary. He couldn't feel a trace of ice and fire aura at all. It was plain and simple, as if it was just an ordinary talisman. The only highlight was the dim light on its surface. Zhuowen walked forward step by step. When he took 10 steps, he was shocked to find that there was an iron fence made of black iron in front of him. He was blocked outside and couldn't get close to the real body of the Ice-Fire Saint talisman. Zhuowen found that the place where the Ice-Fire Saint talisman was located was a square cage. There was a strange confinement force in the cage that firmly imprisoned the Ice-Fire Saint talisman in the middle of the cage. Whoosh. Chapter 1373. Symbol Spirit. The holy ice flame rune trembled violently. Soon after, cold chi and flames intertwined and surged out, transforming into a human figure. The figure's facial features were blurry, and its entire body was made of ice and fire. The figure's eyes were extremely strange. Its left eye was fiery red and seemed to be flowing with magma, while its right eye was icy blue and seemed to be filled with ice and snow. The symbol spirit of the holy ice flame rune? Zhuo Wen stood quietly outside the cage and stared at the figure as he asked doubtfully. The figure looked straight at Zhuo Wen and spoke in an ancient voice, "Young man, you're finally here. You didn't disappoint me. You've come as promised. Since I've come as promised, will you hand over the holy ice flame rune to me?" Zhuo Wen asked calmly. The symbol spirit was taken aback. Soon after, it chuckled and said, "The holy ice flame rune will naturally be handed over to you. However, my body is imprisoned in the ice and fire polarity hall. If you want to obtain me, you must first break the imprisonment of the ice and fire polarity hall." Break the imprisonment? Zhuo Wen furrowed his brows and continued, "At that time, will you really let me control the holy ice flame rune? Young man, don't you believe me? The holy ice flame rune is a treasure of heaven and earth. It cannot exist independently in this world. It must be controlled by someone. If you release me, I will naturally have to rely on you," the symbol spirit said indifferently. Zhuo Wen's eyes flickered. He sent a sound transmission to Xiao Hei in his sea of consciousness. "Xiao Hei, is the symbol spirit right? Can the holy rune only exist by relying on someone else? Indeed. If the holy ice flame rune wants to leave this world, it must rely on an expert to display its great power. Otherwise, if it exists alone in this world, it will be easily discovered by other experts and captured. However, I'm puzzled as to why the holy ice flame rune was suppressed by the master of the ice and fire polarity hall instead of relying on him," Xiao Hei said doubtfully. Upon hearing this, Zhuo Wen nodded his head and explained Xiao Hei's intentions to the symbol spirit. The latter gave a self-deprecating laugh and said, "The master of the ice and fire dual polarity hall is imprisoning me to benefit the entire excellent divine academy. My ice and fire energy can temper a martial artist's meridians and increase their cultivation speed. It is because of the ice and fire dual polarity palace that excellent divine academy is able to produce batch after batch of elite disciples. They are even faintly catching up to Blue Dragon Hall." "I see," Zhuo Wen muttered in a low voice. Soon after, he raised his head and said, "Then tell me how to break out of this cage." The talisman spirit smiled and said, "It's very simple. There's an altar on the left side of the cage. You just have to inject your energy into it to activate the altar. Then, the confinement force of the cage will break and I'll be able to come out." "So simple?" Zhuo Wen frowned and asked in surprise. "How complicated do you want it to be?" The talisman spirit shrugged. "Then I'll give it a try." As he spoke, Zhuo Wen slowly walked to the left. When he reached the end, there was indeed an altar made of white jade on the wall at the end of the corridor. "You just have to place your hand on the altar." The symbol spirit's gentle voice sounded. There was a trace of confusion in it. At the same time, a strange smile appeared on the symbol spirit's lips. Furthermore, this smile grew wider and wider. "Kid, be careful. This altar is not simple. Don't be fooled by the symbol spirit. I'm afraid that half of its words are false." Black's voice suddenly rang out in Zhuo Wen's mind, causing Zhuo Wen, who was about to place his hand on the altar, to stiffen. His right hand also stopped in midair. "Go in." The moment Zhuo Wen's body stopped, a cold voice suddenly sounded from behind him. Then, a claw filled with ice and fire energy grabbed Zhuo Wen's right hand and violently pressed it against the altar. Zhuo Wen's pupils shrank. He quickly turned around and saw that the symbol spirit, which was originally in the cage, had unknowingly appeared behind him. It was as if the symbol spirit was the owner of the palm. "You're wondering how I was able to escape from the cage, right?" The symbol spirit stared at Zhuo Wen as the smile on its face grew increasingly strange. "Haha. It's because of the ice-fire holy symbol's origin in your body. That origin is a seed that I sowed. Now is the time for it to bloom. Young man, don't worry. I will grant you supreme power that will allow you to possess the power of a saint. However, the prerequisite is that you must give your body to me." As soon as the symbol spirit finished speaking, Zhuo Wen's pupils shrank to the size of needles. A word suddenly appeared in his mind: possession. The symbol spirit wanted to possess his body. Whoosh! At the same time, A terrifying suction force came from the altar. Then, Zhuowen felt a throbbing from the depths of his soul. This suction force was directed at his soul and wanted to pull it out. Bastard! Zhuowen cursed angrily as he tried his best to resist the suction force. He did not expect that the symbol spirit had set a trap for him and had been planning for this day's events for a long time. How dare a mere symbol spirit of the Icefire holy symbol plot against me? Die! A black ray of light shot out from between Zhuowen's brows as a dragon's roar reverberated across the sky. Blackie revealed his 10,000-foot-long dragon body, and with a swipe of his enormous dragon claws, he smashed towards the symbol spirit below. Hee, I already knew of your existence when I gave the Icefire holy symbol's origin to this boy. You can't kill me, sacred dragon of extremity. The symbol spirit chuckled and suddenly retreated into the cage. Its enormous dragon claw slammed into the surface of the cage but was unable to shake it at all. What a strong cage! Why is it as hard as a rock? Xiao He glared and said in exasperation. To think that the mighty abyssal saint dragon would fall to such a state. How pathetic. If you were at your peak, you might be able to break this cage, but you won't be able to do so now. The symbol spirit chuckled. Mongrel fox, why aren't you coming out yet? When are you going to stop watching the show? Zhuowen's soul is about to be pulled out by that damned altar. Xiao He roared. I know. Why are you in such a hurry? A solemn voice sounded from Zhuowen's body. Then, Cheng Huang appeared above Zhuowen's head with the Fushi cauldron. It looked at the altar solemnly and pressed down with its right hand. The Fushi cauldron spat out a blazing white light that enveloped the entire altar. Under the suppression of the white light, the terrifying suction force from the altar gradually weakened. The Fushi cauldron? The symbol spirit could not help but exclaim as it stared at Cheng Huang and the Fushi cauldron. Of course it's the Fushi cauldron. Why do you think I'm following this kid? It's mainly because he has something like the Fushi cauldron, Xiao He said indifferently. Zhuowen suddenly opened his eyes when the suction force of the altar weakened. He pulled back his right hand, which was originally placed on the altar. His expression was extremely ugly. He didn't expect to be tricked by the Icefire holy talisman in the end. So you've been tricking me from the beginning? Zhuowen turned his head and stared at the symbol spirit with an extremely unfriendly gaze. The symbol spirit frowned slightly. It had really miscalculated this time. It did not expect Zhuowen to have something like the Fushi cauldron. Hehe. Did you think I was playing house by releasing that wisp of origin source? It's a pity that it fell short of success in the end. The symbol spirit shook its head regretfully. Since the matter had been exposed, the symbol spirit naturally would not continue to pretend and simply shed all pretense of cordiality. Can't a symbol spirit only attach itself to a cultivator? How can it possess a cultivator's body? Zhuowen asked with a slight frown. Xiao He sneered and said, I'm afraid this guy in front of us is not a symbol spirit at all. No matter how intelligent a symbol spirit is, it can't be so cunning. Upon hearing this, the symbol spirit in the cage narrowed its eyes and its expression became ugly. Not a symbol spirit? Zhuowen began to feel surprised. If the Icefire holy talisman in front of him was not a symbol spirit, then what could it be? A symbol spirit will not possess a cultivator's body. Even if it does, it will not be compatible with the human body at all. Only the nascent soul of a cultivator can possess a cultivator's body. This guy in front of us is not a symbol spirit, but someone's nascent soul, Xiao He said indifferently. The symbol spirit's eyes flickered and it suddenly laughed. You're indeed the saint dragon of abyss. You know a lot. But you're wrong about one thing. Even if I'm a symbol spirit, I'm still a nascent soul because I've merged with the Icefire holy talisman's symbol spirit. You've merged with the symbol spirit? But your plan has failed. I'm afraid it will be difficult for you to escape. Xiao He sneered. The symbol spirit shook its head and a pair of strange eyes fell on Zhuowen. Then it said in a charming voice, Zhuowen, don't you want the Icefire holy talisman? Didn't you come all the way to find Divine Academy for the Icefire holy talisman? Now that the Icefire holy talisman is right in front of you, do you really want to miss it? This is a treasure of heaven and earth. It has unimaginable power. If you miss it this time, you won't have another chance. Zhuowen sneered and said, "It's better than being schemed against by you." With that, Zhuowen slowly retreated, intending to leave the 18th floor. But when he retreated to the entrance, he found that the entrance to the 18th floor had been sealed. "You sealed the entrance." Zhuowen's eyes became extremely cold. It seemed that the symbol spirit did not intend to let him leave from the beginning. "Hehe, you can't leave the 18th floor. This is my world." The symbol spirit laughed. Suddenly, the Icefire Holy Talisman, which was quietly suspended in the cage, began to surge with terrifying ice and fire energy that swept across the entire 18th floor. The ice and fire energy was like a tsunami that flooded the sky, drowning Zhuowen. In an instant, the originally quiet 18th level was enveloped by an extremely terrifying pressure. Zhuowen almost staggered from the pressure and knelt on the ground. Chapter 1374. Suppression. Through this trace of origin source, I can sense that you once collected mortal-ranked flames and cold chi, earth-ranked flames and cold chi. Even now, there are heaven-ranked flames and cold chi in this origin source. The heavens are truly helping me. The symbol spirit faced the sky and laughed heartily. Suddenly, the two terrifying energies of 9 flames karmic fire and dark frost poison emerged from its body. The symbol spirit then skillfully fused the two heaven rank energies together. Boom! A huge icefire dragon appeared once again. This time, the icefire dragon's aura was much stronger than before. This was a powerful life form formed from the combination of dark frost poison and 9 flames karmic fire. It probably already had the power of a saint. Roar! The icefire dragon raised its head and roared. Its steel-like dragon tail swept out and heavily bombarded the cage that trapped the Icefire Holy Rune. Countless sparks splashed out and the cage began to shake violently as if there was an earthquake. The power of the Icefire Dragon formed from the combination of heaven-rank flames and cold chi is unimaginable. "Young man, you've really helped me a lot. If I can escape this time, I won't kill you. I'll only take over your body. Moreover, I'll reappear in this world with your identity and lead you to glory." The symbol spirit was wild with joy. Its voice was full of arrogance as if everything was under its control. Outside the cage, Zhuowen looked at the Icefire Dragon with an unsightly expression. The aura of the Icefire Dragon formed from the combination of dark frost poison and 9 flames karmic fire was too terrifying. It was far more powerful than the previous Icefire Dragon. Under the bombardment of the Icefire Dragon, the cage that trapped the symbol spirit shook violently and was on the verge of collapse. It probably wouldn't take long for the cage to collapse on its own. The ice and fire energy on the 18th floor was becoming more and more terrifying. Zhuowen took out his golden feather, and a golden light that was as blazing as the sun burst forth from the feather. It enveloped Zhuowen's body, resisting the ice and fire energy around him. However, the icefire energy was too powerful. Even with the defensive power of the golden feather, Zhuowen could only be trapped in place. He couldn't move forward, let alone stop the Icefire Dragon's attack. What should I do? Zhuowen furrowed his brows, feeling a little flustered. He had naturally experienced how terrifying the Icefire Saint Talisman was. If the Icefire Saint Talisman really escaped, Zhuowen wouldn't be able to subdue it. Brat, try and see if you can regain control of the dark cold poison and 9 flames karmic fire. You did not need the Icefire Saint symbol to completely merge these two energies into the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Palace. If you can control them, you might be able to suppress the Icefire Saint symbol. I'll help you restrain that Icefire Dragon first. The rest is up to you, Xiao He suddenly said to Zhuowen. Soon after, he transformed into 100,000 feet large dragon and roared at the sky. After which, he rushed towards the large ice and fire dragon that was attacking the cage. Rung run rung-a-woo. The ice and fire dragon roared as its eyes spewed fire. It charged over and attacked Xiao He in a frenzy. However, Xiao He was not to be outdone. She let out a clear dragon roar and flew over as well. Boom! Boom! The two dragons collided with each other in an instant. The huge dragon's body was looming above the void like a dark cloud that covered the sky. Zhuowen looked up and could only see the tip of the iceberg of the battle between the two dragons. Brat! Hurry up and control the dark frost poison and 9 flames of karma. Xiao He won't be able to last for long. He's no match for the Icefire Dragon, Cheng Huang said solemnly as he rode on the divine turtle and brought the Fushi cauldron to Zhuowen's side. I'll try my best. Zhuowen took a deep breath and communicated with the dark frost poison and 9 flames of karma on the Icefire Dragon's body. He wanted to separate the two. Then, Zhuowen realized that the Icefire Dragon's body, which was originally full of vigor, had stiffened and slowed down. Xiao He seized the opportunity and slammed its claws on the Icefire Dragon's body, causing it to fall from the sky to the ground. What? This guy can activate the 9 flames of karma and dark frost poison without relying on the Icefire holy symbol. The rune's pupils shrank to the size of needles. She could not believe it. Just now, she had clearly sensed that the Icefire Dragon's body had slowed down under Zhuowen's communication with his mind. As a result, Xiao He had found an opening and slammed it down from the sky. Good job. Zhuowen, continue. Xiao He's huge dragon eyes shone with excitement. She had not expected that Zhuowen would be able to regain control of the 9 flames of karma and dark frost poison without relying on the Icefire holy symbol. Zhuowen nodded and sat cross-legged on the ground. The mind power in his Niwen palace surged out like thousands of tentacles toward the Icefire Dragon that had fallen to the ground. It was as if he wanted to forcibly separate the 9 flames of karma and dark frost poison from the dragon's body. Don't even think about it. The rune roared angrily. It used the Icefire holy symbol's powerful control over the flames and cold air of heaven and earth to prevent the 9 flames of karma and dark frost poison from separating from the Icefire Dragon. This was a competition for the control of the 9 flames karmic fire and the dark frost poison. Whoever was more skilled and could control the 2 types of heaven rank energy would win. Xiao He roared and swooped down, launching a powerful and terrifying attack on the Icefire Dragon. Due to Zhuowen's interference, the Icefire Dragon's strength had decreased greatly. In the battle against Xiao He, the Icefire Dragon could be said to be losing ground. Boom! The Icefire Dragon was once again slammed to the ground by Xiao He. With a roar, the Icefire Dragon's body actually showed signs of collapsing. Zhuowen took advantage of this opportunity to immediately use his mind to separate the 2 energies on the Icefire Dragon's body. "Ci." A strange sound rang out. The 9 flames karmic flame and dark cold poison on the surface of the Ice and Fire Dragon started to peel off. Furthermore, the speed at which they were peeling off increased. Even though the talisman spirit tried its best to stop the stripping, it was of no use. Xiao He was too sinister. While Zhuowen was stripping, she was still attacking the Ice and Fire Dragon and harassing the talisman spirit's control of the 2 types of energy. "Give it to me," Zhuowen shouted. Immediately, the Ice and Fire Dragon that had fallen to the ground roared at the sky. Soon after, its huge dragon body collapsed and turned into black cold air and 9 colored flames. They were the dark cold poison and the 9 flames of karma. Damn it, damn it. The talisman spirit let out a muffled groan and retreated a few steps. Its eyes were filled with shock and anger as it cursed repeatedly. It had clearly retrieved a trace of the Ice Flame Saint Talisman's origin left in Zhuozhangwen's body along with the 2 kinds of heaven rank energies. But now, it had failed. The talisman spirit had never expected that Zhuowen would be able to control the 9 flames of karma and the dark cold poison without relying on the Ice and Fire holy symbol. How did he do it? The 9 flames of karma was the heavenly fire that Zhuowen had created by combining 9 types of earth fire. The dark cold poison was the cold air that Zhuowen had extracted from Mu Chenshue's body. Both of them were inextricably linked to Zhuowen. In addition, Zhuowen had not relied on the Ice and Fire holy symbol on the 7th floor of the Ice and Fire holy hall. He had combined the 9 flames of karma and the dark cold poison to form the Ice and Fire energy of the Ice and Fire holy hall. Therefore, it was not unreasonable that Zhuowen did not need to rely on the Ice and Fire holy symbol to separate the 2 types of energy. Kid, combine the 2 types of energy to form the Ice and Fire holy hall and completely suppress the talisman spirit. If I am not wrong, the owner of the Ice and Fire Holy Hall built the Ice and Fire Holy Hall to suppress the talisman spirit. The Ice and Fire Holy Hall must be extremely effective against the talisman spirit. Xiao Hei transmitted her voice to Zhuowen. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and nodded. I will try. As he spoke, the mental energy in Zhuowen's Niwen Palace burst out and transformed into countless tentacles. They combined the 9 flames of karma and the dark cold poison into the shape of half of a palace. Then, the 2 types of energy suddenly merged together. Instantly, a magnificent palace appeared in the void. The surface of the palace was mixed with 9 different colors. As the 9 colors intersected, a pitch-black cold air continuously circulated. It looked extremely strange. This kid can combine the 2 types of ice and fire energy without relying on the ice and fire holy symbol. How did he do it? The talisman spirit was stunned. However, when his gaze landed on the palace-shaped ice and fire energy above, the shock in his eyes became even more intense. The Ice and Fire Holy Hall? The talisman spirit cried out in alarm, a trace of fear in his eyes. As expected, the talisman spirit is afraid of the Ice and Fire Holy Hall. Perhaps this palace formed from the combination of the 9 flames of karma and the dark cold poison can really suppress the talisman spirit. Zhuowen's eyes brightened. He naturally noticed the fear in the talisman spirit's eyes. With a flip of his hand, the Ice and Fire Holy Hall shrunk to the size of a palm and entered the cage through the gap between the metal bars. No. Get lost. The talisman spirit shrieked and continuously retreated. He raised his hands and terrifying ice and fire energy shot out from his body like a rain of arrows and shot towards the palace. Boom, boom, boom. However, the Ice and Fire Holy Hall formed from heaven-grade energy was far too terrifying in terms of defensive power and power. The talisman spirit's attack was unable to cause any damage to the palace. Swoosh. The Ice and Fire Holy Hall swept in front of the talisman spirit in an instant. Then, under the control of Zhuowen's mind, it expanded inch by inch, from the size of a palm to nearly 100 feet in size. The huge palace came crashing down from above like a towering mountain. The surrounding air was torn apart and a terrifying hurricane swept up. No. Block it. The talisman spirit roared angrily. He raised his hands to the sky and slammed them at the bottom of the Ice and Fire Holy Hall. Waves of ice and fire energy gushed out and resisted the pressure of the palace. Rumble. Under the heavy pressure, the talisman spirit groaned and knelt on one knee on the ground. Suppress it. Chapter 1375. Ranking No. The seal spirit roared angrily. Then, the voice disappeared as the seal spirit was enveloped by the ice and fire dual polarity palace. Zhuowen waved his right hand, and the ice and fire palace shrank to the size of a palm and returned to the palm of Zhuowen's right hand. Through the window of the ice and fire palace, Zhuowen saw a human figure struggling and jumping in the ice and fire palace. It was the seal spirit. Perhaps sensing Zhuowen's spying, the seal spirit glared at him and said, "Young man, what's the use of trapping me? Without me, you can't control the ice and fire holy symbol. I'm the seal spirit of the ice and fire holy symbol." Bullshit seal spirit of the ice and fire holy symbol. As long as the ice and fire holy symbol still exists, it can naturally produce a new seal spirit. Aren't you too stupid to threaten Zhuowen with this? Xiao Hei returned to Xiao Hei's dog form and looked down at the seal spirit in the ice and fire palace with a smirk. The seal spirit's eyes froze. Xiao Hei was right. If the seal spirit died, the ice and fire holy symbol could naturally be reborn. After all, as long as the ice and fire holy symbol's origin was not destroyed, it was fine. The seal spirit of the ice and fire holy symbol in front of him was originally a nascent soul. For some reason, it had become the seal spirit of the ice and fire holy symbol. It could be said that the seal spirit in front of him was not the original seal spirit of the ice and fire holy symbol. Let me go, and I can teach you how to control the ice and fire holy symbol. The seal spirit immediately took a step back. Zhuowen, why don't you refine this guy directly? The ice and fire holy symbol is suppressed by the ice and fire dual polarity palace, so the seal spirit can't mobilize too much energy. That's why you were able to suppress it. Once an accident happens, this guy will be an extremely unstable factor. Xiao He shook his head and said coldly. Zhuowen's heart trembled. Xiao He was right. The seal spirit could not mobilize too much energy because the ice and fire holy symbol was suppressed. In addition, he was lucky enough to comprehend the combination of the 9 flames karmic fire and the dark frost poison to create the ice-fire palace. Only then was he able to suppress it. If the ice-fire saint rune on the 18th floor hadn't been suppressed, Zhuowen would have died immediately. There was no chance for him to survive. I can't let you live. Zhuowen did not hesitate. The ice and fire palace in his hand surged with extremely powerful ice and fire energy, enveloping the seal spirit within. He wanted to refine it and make it a part of the ice and fire palace. No, you'll regret it. You can't do that. Within the ice-fire palace, the symbol spirit's excited cries rang out continuously. Zhuowen turned a deaf ear to it. The energy in his body surged to his ears, completely isolating the symbol spirit's voice. Then, he sat down cross-legged on the ground with the ice-fire palace above his head, silently refining the symbol spirit. Time passed day by day. Soon, half a month had passed. In the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall, many disciples could not withstand the ice and fire energy and left. As time passed, the number of people who came out gradually increased. On the 5th floor, Mo Lingtian slowly stood up. He gazed at his surroundings and muttered in a low voice, "I've reached my limit. However, as promised, I've entered the 5th floor of the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall. Now, I can learn the complete part of the Heaven Burial Sword scripture." Mo Lingtian clenched his fists as he spoke. His cheeks were slightly red and his eyes were filled with excitement. Then, he muttered in his heart and left the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall. On the 7th floor, Qing Yin and Moyan Wushang looked at each other and smiled bitterly. They knew that they had reached their limit and could not advance any further. "Wushang, let's leave. If we continue to stay here, I'm afraid it will cause us permanent damage," Qing Yin said to Moyan Wushang. "I wonder what floor Zhuowen will enter and what his ranking will be this time." Moyan Wushang suddenly opened his mouth and asked. Qing Yin was startled. She immediately smiled and said, "Don't worry. With Zhuowen's talent and strength, entering the top 20 is not a problem. He might even be able to enter the top 10. As for the final result, we'll know once we leave." Moyan Wushang nodded and said, "Yes. Let's leave." On the 9th floor, Gatha and Mu Chunxue left the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall after bidding farewell. Mu Chunxue and Xian Kai were still persevering. After all, the longer they persevered, the better the tempering effect on their bodies. When they returned to cultivate, it was very likely that they would break through the shackles and advance their cultivation. The disciples who had left the Ice-Fire 2 Extreme Hall returned to their respective main peaks. However, they did not return to their own residences. Instead, they stood on the square of their respective main peaks and lifted their heads to stare at the Ice-Fire 2 Extreme Hall without blinking. They wanted to see the final result of the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall. Not only them, but many official disciples and nominal disciples at the bottom of the 9 peaks were also looking up at the sky. When the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall was opened, the white mist that lingered above the middle of the 9 peaks had dissipated. Therefore, the bottom of the 9 peaks could clearly see the true appearance of the 9 peaks and the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall. Although we don't know the final result and the specific situation of the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall, we can still make a guess. The first place will definitely be between Yang Yi of Sky Capital Peak and Fu Yu of Divine Devil Peak. Aren't you talking nonsense? Yang Yi is first on the divine ranking and Fu Yu is second on the divine ranking. The first place will not be between the two of them. Moreover, I believe that the first place will most likely be Yang Yi and Fu Yu will be second. No one left. They stood quietly at the same spot, waiting for the result of the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall. Although they knew that the process might take a few days, half a month or even a month, they still waited. Some cultivation fanatics even sat cross-legged on the square. When they were bored, they would cultivate to pass the time. In the blink of an eye, another half a month had passed. The disciples of the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall came out one after another. Most of them were the elite disciples of the various peaks. The pro-disciple of Ao Yuan Peak, Lu Qing, was one of these disciples. She was ranked 11th. At this point, no disciple of the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall had appeared for a long time. This was because there were only 10 disciples left in the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall. They were the top 10 disciples of the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall. It seems that Zhuowen has entered the top 10. Moyan Wushang of Tai Xian Peak heaved a sigh of relief. Her beautiful eyes were filled with surprise and sadness. Yes. I wonder what Zhuowen's final ranking will be. Qing Yin, who was standing beside Moyan Wushang, nodded and replied. Let's wait. The remaining 10 people should be out soon. Moyan Wushang smiled and said. At this moment, the countless disciples who were paying attention to the final result of the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall had cautious expressions. Moreover, there was also anticipation in their expressions. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. 2 air-piercing sounds flew out from the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall. Then, 2 figures appeared in front of everyone's eyes. The 2 figures were a man and a woman. The man was handsome and tall, while the woman was ordinary. It's Senior Ding Xinghua and Gatha from the Great Void Peak. When the 2 of them appeared, everyone recognized their identities. Then, there was an uproar. The 2 of them were both pro-disciples of the Great Void Peak. It was really unexpected that they had both entered the top 10. At the same time, the names of Ding Xinghua and Gatha appeared above the clouds. Among them, Gatha was ranked 9th and Ding Xinghua was ranked 10th. Only the top 10 could have their names engraved above the clouds. There are still 8 people left. The rest of the people had hopeful expressions. They all wanted to see the rankings of the next 8 people. After 3 days, another figure appeared. This person had a gloomy expression. It was Xian Kai from the Xianming Peak. He was ranked 8th in the end. Xian Kai turned his head and looked at the rankings above the clouds. His face immediately turned ugly. Originally, he had come for the top 3. He did not expect that his final ranking would be so low. Especially when he was ranked behind Zhuowen and Mu Chunxue. This was really humiliating for him. After Xian Kai, the 7th place was Mu Chunxue. Time gradually passed. The remaining warriors also came out. The 6th place was Yuan Wanhe, the 5th was Xu Lingping, and the 4th was Jian Mu. At this moment, there were only 3 people left in the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall. Everyone was familiar with these 3 people. 2 of them were Yang Yi and Fu Yu, who were ranked 1st and 2nd on the divine list. The other person was Zhuowen. What was controversial was that many disciples were surprised that Zhuowen could enter the top 3. They did not know whether it was luck or strength. His luck is pretty good. He can actually enter the top 3. It seems that the Ice and Fire Dragon helped Zhuowen a lot. On the Xianming Peak, Xian Kai frowned slightly. He felt a little uncomfortable as he muttered in a low voice. The 1st and 2nd place should be produced from the 2 senior brothers, Yang Yi and Fu Yu. That Zhuowen's luck is pretty good and should be the 3rd place this time around. I really don't know how a disciple who had just entered the inner academy managed to enter the top 3. Discussions broke out in the surroundings. The most controversial one was naturally Zhuowen. Zhuowen had previously caused a sensation in the inner yard. It was the matter of the Blue Dragon Hall coming to ask for him. It had even caused the 3 saints of the inner yard to come out. It took a long time for the top 3 to come out. After another month, the figure of the 3rd person slowly emerged from the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall. The figure in the light pillar firmly attracted everyone's attention. When they saw the true face of the 3rd person, the surroundings quieted down. Some people even had astonishment in their eyes. This was because the 3rd person was not Zhuowen as everyone had expected. Instead, it was the 2nd on the divine list, Fu Yu, a direct disciple of the divine Devil Peak. Fu Yu quietly floated in the void. He raised his head and looked at his ranking in the sky. When he saw the 3rd place, his eyes narrowed. However, he did not say anything. Instead, he silently returned to the divine Devil Peak. Senior brother Fu Yu. A young man came to Fu Yu's side and said casually. Chapter 1376. Jianan rubbed his head and said in a slightly embarrassed manner, I've only entered the 6th level. I can't compare to senior brother at all. Fu Yu revealed a look of admiration and said, You've only just started cultivating the 9 transformations of the demon and god, yet you've already entered the 6th level of the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Hall. If you seriously cultivate the 9 transformations of the demon and god in the future, your strength will surpass mine sooner or later. Jianan chuckled and said in an even more embarrassed manner, Senior brother Fu Yu, you're too kind. The gap between the two of us is huge. You're really exaggerating. Fu Yu shook his head and didn't say anything. He was clearly aware of how terrifying the undying armor soul was. Perhaps Jianan didn't realize it himself, but Fu Yu knew that if Jianan's cultivation improved and he successfully cultivated the 9 transformations of the demon and god, it wouldn't be strange for him to surpass Fu Yu with the undying armor soul. However, Fu Yu didn't explain in detail. He was clearly aware that Jianan's cultivation wasn't high yet, so he hadn't sensed it yet. He would naturally understand it once his cultivation was high in the future. Only Yang Yi and Zhuowen are left in the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Hall. Zhuowen is really not bad. He will probably get 2nd place this time. This ranking is really not bad for a new student. Fu Yu muttered softly while his brows knit together slightly. He had naturally heard of Zhuowen, but he didn't pay much attention to him in the past. After all, Zhuowen was a new student that had just entered the inner court. No matter how strong he was, how strong could he be? But now, Fu Yu realized that he had completely underestimated Zhuowen. This fellow had actually surpassed him in the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Hall in the end. The only question was whether Zhuowen had caught up to Yang Yi. Of course, in Fu Yu's heart, Zhuowen's chances of obtaining first was far lower than Yang Yi. This wasn't just Fu Yu's thoughts, it was also the thoughts of everyone who was paying attention to this matter. Not necessarily. I feel that big brother Zhuowen also has a very high chance of obtaining 1st place. Jianan suddenly spoke, causing Fu Yu to look at him with slight surprise. He said, Jianan, you know Zhuowen? Jianan grinned and said, I entered the inner court with big brother Zhuowen. We were both outer court disciples in the past. I see. Fu Yu nodded, then asked with interest, and why are you so sure that Zhuowen has a high chance of getting 1st place? Intuition? Because big brother Zhuowen has never let me down. He has always been number 1. Even this time is no exception. Jianan laughed heartlessly. Fu Yu was taken aback, his face filled with astonishment. Soon after, he smiled and said, What a simple reason. However, 1st place is not up to you. Instead, it depends on whether Zhuowen has the ability to do so. Although the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace does not necessarily depend on one's strength, Yang Yi can be considered a monster in every aspect. Of course, there is one aspect where he is barely passable, and that is that he is too lazy. Fu Yu shook his head as he spoke. Clearly, he did not agree with Jianan's words. I believe in big brother Zhuowen, Jianan said in a rather stubborn manner. Fu Yu was taken aback, but he did not say anything else. After spending some time together, he had become somewhat familiar with Jianan's character. This little fellow was extremely stubborn. If he was determined on something, even 10 horses would not be able to pull him back. Therefore, Fu Yu did not get too entangled with Jianan on this topic. Instead, he silently waited for the appearance of the 2nd place. Time continued to flow. Countless disciples of the inner court waited with raised heads. Their gazes landed on the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace. They were clearly aware that once the 2nd place appeared, the 1st place would naturally be known. Another month passed. On this day, the energy on the surface of the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace began to churn violently. An enormous pillar of light appeared outside the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace. A figure was faintly discernible within the pillar of light. It appeared somewhat blurry. It's about to appear. Who will be the 2nd place? The moment the pillar of light appeared, the atmosphere of the entire inner court became somewhat solemn. Numerous gazes stared intently at the figure that had appeared on the pillar of light. The light gradually faded away, revealing a lazy figure. Then, the surroundings became extremely quiet. Everyone stared at the lazy figure in a daze, unable to speak to themselves for a long time. Of course, after the silence, there was an uproar. This was because the person who had appeared was none other than the first place on the divine list, Yang Yi. The fellow who everyone thought would be the first place this time. Senior brother Yang Yi is actually only second place. In other words, Zhuowen from Ao Yuan Peak is first place. The sound of discussion swept out like an avalanche. Everyone's eyes were filled with disbelief. In particular, the dozen core disciples from Ao Yuan Peak cheered. Lu Qing's beautiful eyes stared excitedly at the ranking in the clouds. Zhuowen actually won first place in the end. This was really beyond the expectations of Ao Yuan Peak. At the same time, it also made the dozen core disciples of Ao Yuan Peak feel proud and elated. For many years, Ao Yuan Peak had been ranked last among the 9 peaks of the inner court. Not only did it have few cultivation resources and low yuan qi concentration, but the peak master of Ao Yuan Peak, Xiao Yu, also didn't care about anything. As a disciple of Ao Yuan Peak, when walking in the inner court, he would often be looked at strangely by the disciples of other peaks. Many disciples of Ao Yuan Peak had enough of such treatment. Now, Zhuowen had won the first place for their Ao Yuan Peak. At this moment, their Ao Yuan Peak was no longer the worst peak that everyone pointed at and talked about. Yang Yi naturally also noticed the surrounding gazes, but he didn't care too much. Instead, his gaze fell on the ranking in the clouds. When he saw that he was ranked second, he let out a low sigh. His heart was slightly complicated. Sigh, I'm really unlucky. What the hell is wrong with the Ice Flame Saint Talisman? It actually sealed the entrance to the 18th floor. Yang Yi touched his head with a slight headache. He knew that if it weren't for the Ice Flame Saint Talisman, the first place would have fallen into his hands. However, he also knew that it was useless to think about it now. The result was already doomed. Thinking of this, Yang Yi slowly landed on Sky Capital Peak. Senior brother, you're actually second. Did you go easy on him? Feng Nianlan immediately greeted him with a suspicious look. Jianmu also came to Yang Yi. Although he didn't speak, the suspicion in his eyes showed that he didn't believe that Yang Yi would lose to Zhuowen. Yang Yi yawned and pointed to the ranking in the clouds. In fact, I'm indeed second. This ranking won't lie. Yang Yi was too lazy to explain. After he finished speaking, he casually came to a stone pillar in the square and lazily leaned against it. His face was filled with calmness, without any sense of defeat. Junior sister Chen Shui, your lover is pretty good. I now know that you won't be at a disadvantage if you follow that brat. Yang Yi suddenly gave a thumbs up to Mu Chenxue. Mu Chenxue was taken aback. Soon after, a brilliant smile appeared on the corner of her mouth. Her beautiful eyes fell on the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Palace as a trace of pride emerged in her heart. Zhuowen was Mu Chenxue's lover. This news had already spread in the inner court. Because of this, there were many people who slandered Zhuowen, believing that Zhuowen wasn't worthy of Mu Chenxue. However, from today onwards, those people who slandered him would obediently shut their mouths. Zhuowen had suppressed Yang Yi and Fu Yu in the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Palace, becoming the number 1 person this time. Who would dare to say that Zhuowen wasn't worthy of Mu Chenxue? On the Divine Devil Peak, Fu Yu was completely stunned. He licked his somewhat dry lips and softly said, "It can't be. Yang Yi is actually second and Zhuowen is first. Heh. I knew that big brother Zhuowen would definitely be first." My intuition is as accurate as ever. Jianan, who was beside Fu Yu, tightly clenched his fists. His face was flushed red as he laughed out loud. However, this laughter was rather ear-piercing when it reached Fu Yu's ears, and the corners of his eyes involuntarily twitched. Obviously, he felt a little annoyed by Jianan's baseless guess. However, it just so happened that Jianan had guessed correctly. Therefore, the current feeling in Fu Yu's heart was as if he had eaten a bitter gourd. He felt extremely helpless. Zhuowen is first. Wushang, Zhuowen is actually first. On the Taishen Peak, Qingyan couldn't help but exclaim out loud. Moyan Wushang, who was standing beside Qingyan, was stunned at first. He immediately revealed a sweet smile, but there was a tinge of bitterness in his smile. It seems that the two of you know Zhuowen. This time, Ao Yuan Peak has really taken in a good disciple. He actually managed to obtain first place in the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Palace. Yuan Wanhe, who was standing in front of the two girls, revealed a tinge of surprise in her eyes. However, it was quickly replaced by a smile. Brother Zhuo is still as powerful and terrifying as ever. He actually obtained first place. This is really, on the Hidden Sword Peak, Mo Lingtian stared blankly at the final result. Then, the corners of his mouth were filled with a bitter smile. Talent is innate, but hard work can make up for it. Suddenly, a cold voice came from behind Mo Lingtian. Mo Lingtian turned his head and immediately saw Xu Lingping, who had a small sword on her waist, looking at him indifferently. Senior Xu, you are right. Hard work can make up for it. Mo Lingtian bowed respectfully. Xu Lingping was the strongest pro-disciple of the Hidden Sword Peak. This time, she was ranked 5th. She was an existence that Mo Lingtian looked up to. He had to treat her with caution. Take it. This is the complete version of the Heaven Burial Sword scripture. Everything must be done step by step. Don't belittle yourself. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Don't let external things affect your heart. Otherwise, you won't be able to go far on the road of martial arts. After saying this, Xu Lingping elegantly turned around, leaving Mo Lingtian with a rather proud and aloof back view. Mo Lingtian was stunned. Xu Lingping, who usually didn't talk much, had said so much to him today. This made Mo Lingtian feel a little flattered. He couldn't help but whisper, "It's rare for Senior Xu to say so much. I must live up to her expectations." Chapter 1377. Lockdown. The top 10 rankings had already been revealed, but none of the countless disciples in the inner court left. Their gazes were fixed on the Ice and Fire Polarity Palace. This was because there was still one person who had yet to emerge from the Ice and Fire Polarity Palace, and that was Zhuowen, who was ranked first this time. Although Zhuowen's reputation in the inner court had been quite strong for a long time, only the disciples of Sky Capital Peak and Mysterious Yuan Peak had seen Zhuowen's true appearance. The disciples of the other main peaks had never seen Zhuowen's true appearance. There were many disciples who were looking forward to seeing the number 1 of the Ice and Fire Dual Extremes Palace this time around. Among them, there were many female disciples whose eyes were shining brightly, as though they were hungry wolves. However, after Yang Yi emerged, Zhuowen did not appear as everyone had expected. The Ice and Fire Polarity Palace was still very quiet. Time continued to pass. 1 month, 2 months, after 3 months, there was still no movement from the Ice and Fire Polarity Palace. Some people in the inner court began to get impatient. Although martialists who had stepped onto the path of martial arts were extremely patient, waiting for 3 months was still quite unbearable. What's going on? Why hasn't Zhuowen come out yet? Could something have happened inside? Many disciples in the inner court began to discuss spiritedly. They were guessing what had happened to Zhuowen inside. On Sky Capital Peak, Mu Chunxue was waiting. She raised her head slightly and stared at the Ice and Fire Polarity Palace. Her beautiful eyebrows were tightly knitted together, and a trace of worry appeared in her heart. 3 months had passed, and Zhuowen still had not come out. This was very strange in itself. It could not help but make Mu Chunxue worried and even afraid. She was afraid that something had happened to Zhuowen. Eldest senior brother, do you know which level Zhuowen entered the Ice and Fire Polarity Palace? In the end, Mu Chunxue walked towards Yang Yi, who was lazily leaning against a stone pillar, and asked while biting her lower lip. Yang Yi narrowed his eyes and said, "I entered the 17th floor. Zhuowen, that brat, entered the 18th floor. Don't ask me why. In fact, I don't know what happened to that brat on the 18th floor. The 18th floor? Eldest senior brother, you're not making this up, right? Only 3 martial granduncles have entered the 18th level before, right? Although the violent energy of the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Palace has weakened a lot this time, it should be very difficult for anyone who hasn't entered the Saint stage to enter, right? Feng Nianlan said in disbelief. Even Jian Mu, who was standing by the side with an emotionless expression, revealed a rare expression of shock. Zhuoan had actually reached the final level of the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall. This was a little too frightening. The 18th floor? Mu Chunshue's expression changed. Wasn't the 18th floor where the Ice-Fire holy symbol was? The ice and fire energy in that place was the most terrifying. Zhuoan would most likely be in danger if he entered. What should we do? Mu Chunshue was a little flustered. Her tender body trembled. She was afraid that something would happen to Zhuoan. Junior sister Chen Shui, Zhuoan is very lucky. Nothing will happen to him. Perhaps because he noticed Mu Chunshue's strange state, Jian Mu suddenly spoke to comfort her. Boom. 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 Suddenly, a terrifying explosion sounded around the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall. Then, everyone in the inner court was stunned to find that the ice and fire energy around the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall began to become violent. In the end, it was like a monstrous tsunami, raging in the void. The energy of the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall has recovered and become violent again. Many of the Inner Academy's disciples revealed stunned expressions when they saw this scene. Soon after, they reacted. Every once in a while, the violent energy on the surface of the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall would weaken to the lowest point. However, this situation wouldn't last forever. This weakening of the energy could only last for half a year. Once half a year was up, the energy of the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall would once again regain its violent state. Previously, the other disciples had spent over 3 months to come out. In addition to the 3 months that everyone had spent waiting for Zhuoan, it was exactly half a year. The violent energy of the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall had finally recovered. Zhuoan still hasn't come out? Seeing this scene, many disciples of the inner court were stunned. Originally, the reason why they were waiting here was because of Zhuoan. Now that the energy on the surface of the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall had once again regained its violent state, Zhuoan still hadn't come out. Could it be that something had happened? Boom. 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 Just as everyone was guessing, the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall began to tremble intensely. The violent ice and fire energy on its surface was like a swimming dragon, continuously swimming and circulating on its surface. It was an extremely frightening sight. The 9 thick chains that were originally fixed to the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall continued to tremble within the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall. The originally pitch-black surface of the chains was covered with red and blue colors. This was caused by the ice and fire energy. Bang! 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 The trembling of the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall was extremely intense. In fact, it even affected the entire inner court. The 9 main peaks that reached into the clouds began to tremble continuously. Countless rocks fell from the peaks, smashing into the bottom of the 9 peaks. This also caused quite a commotion. Many official and nominal disciples at the bottom of the 9 peaks lost their heads out of fear as they resisted the countless rocks that fell from the top of the 9 peaks. The disciples on the 9 peaks were in an even more miserable state than the disciples at the bottom of the 9 peaks. The entire mountain was trembling. Many core disciples directly lay on the ground, not daring to stand up. After all, the trembling that permeated the 9 peaks was far too intense. It was as if the 9 peaks were about to collapse because of this. Only a small number of stronger disciples stood where they were, as if their feet were rooted to the ground. However, their expressions were quite ugly. At this moment, the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall appeared especially strange. Normally speaking, after the violent energy on the surface of the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall had recovered, it should have calmed down as usual. However, the entire Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall was currently going berserk. It was as if there was a wild and uneasy heart within the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall that was continuously beating, disrupting the rhythm of the entire Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. 12 figures rushed out from the clouds while the hearts of the many Inner Academy disciples were pounding. The one leading them was the headmaster of the inner academy, Yang Ji. It is the 3 martial granduncles and the 9 peak masters. They should have a way to deal with this ice and fire dual extreme hall that has suddenly become berserk. Many inner academy disciples revealed hopeful expressions when the 12 people appeared. The ice and fire dual extreme hall was currently too frightening. If they did not stop it, it was very difficult for them to imagine whether the inner academy would be destroyed because of it. Martial Uncle Yang Ji, we must immediately seal the ice and fire dual extreme hall. Otherwise, the ice and fire energy that is being emitted will have an extremely frightening effect on the inner academy. Among the 12 people, Xian Zhong suddenly opened his mouth and spoke. Xiao Yu's expression changed slightly. He hurriedly said, "This cannot be done. Zhuowen is still inside. How can we seal the ice and fire dual extreme hall now? If we seal it, how will Zhuowen come out?" Xian Zhong spoke in a decisive manner. "Xiao Yu, you are being selfish and ignoring the big picture. If this ice and fire energy is not contained, it is likely that the 9 peaks of the inner academy will be destroyed. How can we ignore the safety of the inner academy because of a Zhuowen? Bullshit." Xiao Yu cried out furiously. He immediately spoke to Yang Ji, "Martial Granduncle Yang Ji, let's wait a little longer. Zhuowen might be about to come out. If we seal it now, it is likely that Zhuowen will not be able to come out. Martial Granduncle, you should not listen to Xiao Yu's nonsense. Zhuowen has not come out after such a long time. It is likely that he has died inside. There is no need for us to ignore the safety of the inner academy because of a dead person." Xian Zhong spoke in a righteous manner. His appearance made Xiao Yu feel like giving him a punch. Yang Ji's eyes flickered as he said, "All right, the 2 of you should stop arguing. Let's wait for another hour. After an hour has passed, I can feel that the ice and fire energy on the surface of the ice and fire dual extreme hall will likely erupt. We must seal it before that happens." "Thank you, Martial Granduncle Yang Ji." Xiao Yu's eyes brightened as he hurriedly expressed his gratitude. As for Xian Zhong, he frowned slightly. His expression was somewhat ugly. His gaze landed on the ice and fire dual extreme hall as his eyes flickered. No one knew what he was thinking. Why haven't the 3 martial granduncles sealed the ice and fire dual extreme hall? This ice and fire energy is too wild and violent. Even I can't endure it. I'm afraid that they are waiting for Zhuowen to appear. However, when will this wait end? Perhaps Zhuowen has already died inside. Waiting like this will only make us suffer. Many disciples of the 9 peaks began to complain. The wild and violent ice and fire energy was very frightening. If one's strength was insufficient, it was very easy for one's meridians to be shattered by the ice and fire energy. At that time, one would become a cripple. On Capital Sky Peak, Mu Chunshue's delicate hands were tightly clenched. Her palms were filled with sparkling sweat. Her beautiful eyes were filled with worry as she softly muttered, "Zhuowen, nothing must happen to you." Time passed second by second. Finally, an hour had passed. The ice and fire energy on the surface of the ice and fire dual extreme hall had reached an extremely frightening level. Under this might, the entire inner academy shook violently. Some casualties had even begun to appear. Martial Granduncle, Zhuowen has yet to appear. I'm afraid that he has died inside. Hurry up and seal it. Xian Zhong opened his mouth once again. Xiao Yu wanted to refute, but he realized that there was no other reason to refute Xian Zhong. An hour was the limit that Yang Ji could give. The current ice and fire energy was too frightening. It had already caused a certain number of casualties in the inner academy. They could not delay any longer. Yang Ji glanced at Xiao Yu and sighed softly. "Yang Ji, we can only look at the bigger picture." With that, Yang Ji waved his hand and stepped into the air with Jiang Xian and Wen Bai. They stood around the ice and fire dual extreme hall. The martial granduncles have taken action. It looks like they plan to seal the ice and fire dual extreme hall. We're saved now. Many cultivators sighed gently when they saw Yang Ji and the other 2's actions. They knew that the 3 saints could easily seal the ice and fire dual extreme hall. Chapter 1378. Like a moth to a flame, Xiao Yu opened his mouth as he watched the door of the Ice and Fire Polar Hall gradually close. In the end, he did not say a single word. He knew that if the door of the Ice and Fire Polar Hall was not closed, the ice and fire energy surrounding the hall would become extremely terrifying. At that time, it would probably cause irreparable damage to the inner court. Zhuowen, I've let you down. Xiao Yu clenched his fists as he muttered in a low voice with a guilty expression. At this moment, Xiao Yu felt as if he had fallen from heaven to hell. Just a moment ago, he was extremely excited because Zhuowen had obtained first place, but now, he was extremely dejected because Zhuowen was unable to come out of the Ice and Fire Duel Extreme Hall. Xiao Yu, don't worry. Once the violent energy of the Ice and Fire Polar Hall calms down, I will personally enter the 18th floor. At that time, if Zhuowen is still alive, I will bring him out. Just as Xiao Yu was frowning, Yang Ji's voice suddenly rang out in his head, causing him to immediately calm down. Thank you, teacher Uncle Yang Ji, Xiao Yu replied. Actually, he wanted Yang Ji to enter the Ice and Fire Polar Hall right now, but he also knew that the ice and fire energy on the surface of the Ice and Fire Polar Hall was just too violent. Perhaps Yang Ji could enter the first few floors without any problems. However, the ice and fire energy on the last floor of the Ice and Fire Polar Hall was so violent that even Yang Ji would find it difficult to resist it. If it was any other time, it would be rather easy for Yang Ji to enter the 18th floor. However, the violent energy on the surface of the Ice and Fire Polar Hall was far more violent than usual. Even Yang Ji would find it difficult to enter the 18th floor of the Ice and Fire Polar Hall. Moreover, if he did not seal off the Ice and Fire Polar Hall, the ice and fire energy on the surface would become very violent. At that time, it would definitely cause heavy casualties to the inner court. This was also why Yang Ji planned to enter the 18th floor after sealing off the Ice and Fire Polar Hall. Swish! When the door of the Ice and Fire Polar Hall was about to close, the sound of something rushing through the air rang out. Afterwards, a beautiful figure shot through the air under everyone's shocked gazes, heading towards the door that was about to close. Chen Shui. Old man Tian Du's eyes were sharp. He immediately saw the beautiful figure flying out and could not help but roar in anger. He took a step forward and chased after the beautiful figure. Junior sister Chen Shui. The moment old man Tian Du rushed out, Jian Mu suddenly took out the long sword on his back and stepped on it. With a whoosh, he quickly chased after Mu Chunxue. It's Mu Chunxue. What does she want? Are you courting death by approaching the Ice and Fire Duel Extremes Palace at this time? The countless inner court disciples who were originally paying attention to the changes in the Ice and Fire halls revealed surprise and bewilderment in their eyes. They had never expected that Mu Chunxue would actually rush towards the Ice and Fire halls at this moment. Right now, the energy in the Dual Polarity Palace was extremely violent. Mu Chunxue's cultivation was only at the 7th level of the Great Emperor realm. Entering the palace with such a cultivation level was no different from courting death. Chen Shui, come back. Old man Tian Du roared angrily. His speed soared to the extreme and he instantly rushed behind Mu Chunxue. He reached out a hand to grab her. Master, don't stop me. I must go in. I want to see Zhuowen. Mu Chunxue raised her jade-like hand and the Xianming orb appeared in her hand. The terrifying Xianming law turned into a giant black python and rushed out, attacking Old man Tian Du. Old man Tian Du's face was a little ugly. He punched out and countless green vines rushed out, full of vitality. The law that this old man had mastered was the law of wood, which had surging vitality and recovery ability. Boom! 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 The law of wood and the Xianming law collided and a terrifying explosion rang out. Old man Tian Du frowned and his charging footsteps stopped. Chen Shui, don't do anything stupid. The energy in the Ice and Fire Duel Extremes Palace is too violent. You're courting death if you go in. I'm afraid that Zhuowen is already dead inside. There's no need for you to go in and be buried with him. Jian Mu stood on his flying sword and roared out. Mu Chunxue shook her head. With a wave of her jade-like hand, a jade talisman appeared in her palm. She crushed it and a surge of energy rushed out, surrounding her body. Her speed soared to the extreme. Whoosh! In an instant, Mu Chunxue turned into a stream of light and disappeared before everyone's eyes. In the next moment, Mu Chunxue had already landed at the entrance of the Ice and Fire Dual Extremes Palace. At this moment, there was only a gap left at the entrance. In just a few breaths of time, the door would be completely closed. Don't! Jianmu roared. The flying sword under his feet exploded with blazing light. At this moment, his speed increased by several times. He was even faster than old man Tiandu. In just a breath of time, he had already closed in on the Ice and Fire Dual Extremes Palace. Zhuowen won't die. Even if he dies, I plan to be buried with him and stay by his side. After Mu Chunxue firmly said these words, she revealed a sweet smile. At this moment, Mu Chunxue's smile had a special charm that attracted the gazes of countless people in the inner court. After saying this, Mu Chunxue took a step forward. The instant the door closed, she disappeared from everyone's sight. Just like this, Mu Chunxue entered the Ice and Fire Dual Extremes Palace alone. At this moment, the 9 main peaks of the inner court fell into a strange silence. Everyone stood in a daze as they stared at the still-closed door of the Ice and Fire Dual Extremes Palace. At this moment, everyone seemed to have a tacit understanding. They didn't say anything and their actions were strangely uniform. They raised their heads and looked at the door in a daze. In their minds, the resolute figure of Mu Chunxue stepping into the Ice and Fire Dual Extremes Palace echoed for a long time. In their ears, Mu Chunxue's final words were like a demon's voice that continuously resounded. Elder sister Chen Shui can actually do this for Zhuowen. On the Taishen Peak, Moyan Wushang's body turned cold. Her beautiful eyes were filled with sadness and sadness. She finally knew why Zhuowen would fall in love with Mu Chunxue and even adopt an indifferent attitude towards other girls. It turned out that Mu Chunxue's feelings for Zhuowen were so deep. She had given up so much for him and was even willing to give up her life in the end. Towards such a woman who cared about her feelings, Zhuowen would not allow himself to do anything that would let her down. So after coming in contact with Mu Chunxue, Zhuowen treated other girls with indifference. Even for Moyan Wushang, Zhuowen had never stepped over the final hurdle. Perhaps Zhuowen did have a good impression of Moyan Wushang, but he would never do anything intimate with her. I can't do what elder sister Chen Shui can do for Zhuowen. Moyan Wushang revealed a sad smile. At this moment, she suddenly found that she was a bit useless. She couldn't be like Mu Chunxue who gave up everything for Zhuowen, even if it was her life. She couldn't be like Mu Chunxue who had great talent and strength to help Zhuowen solve problems within her power. She could only look at Zhuowen or talk to him, but she didn't do anything. It's not without reason that Zhuowen loves elder sister Chen Shui. I can't be compared to elder sister Chen Shui. Moyan Wushang squatted on the ground and tears flowed out of the corners of her eyes. Qingyin, who was standing beside Moyan Wushang, didn't say anything. She just stood there silently and her eyes were also filled with sighs. On the Divine Devil Peak, Fu Yu sighed and said, "For that Zhuowen, Mu Chunxue is willing to enter the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall. Is it really worth it? This kind of sacrifice is just too stupid. Senior brother Fu Yu, you're wrong." Beside him, Jianan suddenly said in a deep voice. At this moment, Jianan's face didn't look good and was even a little pale. Fu Yu was stunned. He looked deeply at Jianan and said, "Why do you say that? The ice and fire energy in the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall is too violent. Zhuowen is most likely dead inside. It's not worth it to sacrifice your life for someone who's about to die." Jianan shook her head and said, "Maybe you don't think it's worth it, but elder sister Chen Shui thinks it's worth it. Because elder sister Chen Shui loves big brother Zhuowen deeply. In the vast heavenly armor continent, it's rare to meet the person you're destined to meet. It's even rarer to know each other in love. Since you've met each other, it's worth it to sacrifice everything you can for each other. If elder brother Zhuowen encountered this kind of situation, he would do the same thing. Whether it's worth it or not depends on different people." Fu Yu was stunned. He didn't expect that the usually carefree Jianan would become so deep at this moment. It was as if this kid had become a completely different person. Whoosh whoosh. Jianmu and Old Man Tianju also came to the door of the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall. However, the door was tightly shut and the two of them couldn't enter. "Open for me." Jianmu's eyes were scarlet red. He clenched his right hand and slashed out with his long sword. A terrifying sword light turned into a crescent moon and heavily smashed the door of the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The sword light only caused the door to sway a little before it completely disappeared. "Open for me." Jianmu was almost crazy. He slashed out again and again. Dense sword light filled the entire space, looking extremely terrifying. However, the sword light didn't have much of an effect. After slamming into the door, it completely disappeared. Although the sword light didn't have any effect, Jianmu didn't care. He was like a madman, constantly slashing out with the longsword in his hand. "Jianmu, stop. With your current strength, it's impossible for you to break open the door." Old Man Tianju shouted from behind Jianmu. However, Old Man Tianju's words didn't have any effect. Jianmu was almost crazy and didn't care about Old Man Tianju's words at all. "Stop." Old Man Tianju shouted. The law of wood gushed out from his palm. Suddenly, green vines shot out like pythons and wrapped around Jianmu's body, causing him to completely stop. "Master, let me go." Chapter 1379. Jianmu's advancement. Looking at Jianmu's scarlet eyes, Old Man Tianju's heart trembled. Jianmu's eyes were filled with madness and brutality. Even Old Man Tianju felt a trace of fear when he looked at Jianmu. "Jianmu, calm down. The door of the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace has been completely closed. You can't enter. Moreover, the ice and fire energy on the surface is constantly increasing. If you stay here for too long, it will cause permanent damage to your meridians." Old Man Tianju's face was extremely gloomy as he secretly warned Jianmu. "Go away." Jianmu roared as the law of ruthlessness erupted from his body. His clothes fluttered and his hair danced in the wind. The countless vines released by the Old Man of Tianju were all shattered by this power. Old Man Tianju's pupils shrank. He took a few steps back and stared at Jianmu solemnly. At that moment, Jianmu's aura became more and more frightening. Like a flood or a ferocious beast, he rushed over with a force that could topple mountains and overturn seas. The law of ruthlessness that emerged from his body was like the sharpest blade in winter, causing many of the surrounding disciples to feel their skin turn cold. Moreover, the law of ruthlessness's power was getting stronger and stronger, stimulating everyone's eyes. Rumble. Suddenly, everyone was stunned to see countless clouds in the sky above Jianmu. These clouds spiraled in a clockwise direction. At the center of the clouds was an extremely terrifying law of ruthlessness. As the clouds spiraled, the law of ruthlessness began to condense. In the end, it turned into a huge invisible longsword that suddenly fell and hovered behind Jianmu. Boom! The moment the invisible longsword landed on Jianmu's back, a ruthless intent spread out with Jianmu as the center. Terrifying waves of air overflowed in a circular manner. The law of ruthlessness has descended from the heavens. Jianmu has completely comprehended the law of ruthlessness and become an invincible sovereign lord. Old Man Tianju steadied himself and stared at Jianmu, who was quietly floating in the midst of the law of ruthlessness. He didn't expect Jianmu to completely comprehend the law of ruthlessness at this time and step into the invincible sovereign lord realm. Jianmu slowly opened his eyes. In the depths of his pupils, there was a deep sense of ruthlessness. Then, he reached out with his right hand and placed the long sword on his back again. Then, he grabbed the long sword formed by the law of ruthlessness descending from the sky. This emotionless sword was very long. It was several times longer than Jianmu's body, reaching a length of several zhong. "Break." Jianmu coldly spat out these words. With a twist of his right hand, he gripped the hilt of his sword and took a step forward with his right foot. The sword swung with his body and slammed heavily into the entrance of the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace. Boom! Boom! Following that, everyone from the inner yard was shocked to discover that the entire Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace was trembling violently. After Zhenmu had become an invincible sovereign lord and grasped the law of emotionlessness, he was able to unleash such terrifying power. He was probably comparable to Old Man Tiandu, although Elder Tiandu was a half-step saint. The law he had mastered was only the law of wood of the 5 elements. It was the most common law, and there was a huge gap between it and a special law like the law of ruthlessness. Even if Old Man Tiandu's cultivation was higher than Zhenmu's, the gap between the two wasn't as big as imagined. Stop, Zhenmu. Even if you've become an invincible sovereign lord, you can't break open the entrance of the ice and fire dual polarity palace. Come back. Old Man Tiandu naturally wouldn't let Zhenmu continue to do such a foolish thing. He roared angrily and took a step forward. The terrifying law of wood lingered in his hands. Suddenly, a huge hand wrapped in tree branches stretched out from the ground and swept towards Zhenmu. Zhenmu narrowed his eyes and slashed the emotionless sword behind him. Instantly, a sword shadow crossed the sky and stabbed towards the huge hand formed by the tree branches. Boom! 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 In an instant, the tree branch hand was completely annihilated by this attack, disintegrating into nothingness. How terrifying! Looking at Zhenmu's attack, many of the surrounding disciples were stunned. Zhenmu, who had grasped the law of emotionlessness, was too terrifying. Sword cultivator, coupled with the law of emotionlessness, the strength Zhenmu can unleash is beyond everyone's imagination. On the sky capital peak, Yang Yi leaned against a stone pillar and narrowed his eyes as he watched the battle between Zhenmu and Old Man Tiandu. There was a hint of admiration in his eyes. Eldest senior brother, you're still in the mood to make irresponsible remarks here? Why don't you go and help master? Zhenmu has completely gone crazy, Feng Nianlan said to the lazy Yang Yi in a somewhat exasperated manner. Yang Yi shook his head and yawned. It's good to let Zhenmu go crazy. Don't you think the battle between Zhenmu and Old Man Tiandu is a good show? Why should I stop it? Feng Nianlan was speechless. Boom. 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 Zhenmu had almost gone crazy and was actually fighting with Old Man Tiandu. Between the two, extremely terrifying law power was emitted. Under the influence of this law power, the surrounding space collapsed and collapsed. It was extremely terrifying. Countless disciples of the 9 Peaks watched this scene in horror. They didn't expect that Zhenmu, who had grasped the law of emotionlessness and had just become an invincible sovereign lord, could actually fight Old Man Tiandu to such an extent. Moreover, some disciples with sharp eyes even noticed that as the battle continued, Old Man Tiandu was actually at a disadvantage. Hee. Zhenmu has just become an invincible sovereign lord, so his control over the law of emotionlessness isn't very skillful. When he fully grasps the law of emotionlessness, Old Man Tiandu will probably be crushed. Yang Yi leaned against the stone pillar, his eyes still drowsy, and his voice was lazy, as if there was nothing in the world that could make this guy excited. Feng Nianlan looked at Yang Yi in surprise. It turned out that the latter was holding this goal. He didn't stop Zhenmu so that he could use the battle to master the law of emotionlessness. However, this guy really didn't put her master, Old Man Tiandu, in his eyes. He actually used her master to test Zhenmu's combat strength. I almost forgot. Eldest senior brother seems to have never put master in his eyes. Feng Nianlan held her forehead, realizing that her actions just now were too stupid. Zhenmu is so strong. He's actually starting to suppress Old Man Tiandu. There was an uproar in the surroundings. Everyone discovered that Zhenmu and Old Man Tiandu, who should have been evenly matched, had now completely suppressed Old Man Tiandu. Yang Ji naturally noticed the abnormality here, but he, Wen Bai, and Jiang Xian were presiding over the ceiling of the Ice and Fire Dual Extremes Palace. They simply couldn't free up their hands to stop the battle between Zhenmu and Old Man Tiandu. Xiao Yu, Lu Yuanhua, the two of you go and assist Tiandu. The Ice and Fire Dual Extremes Palace is about to be sealed. Take Zhenmu away immediately. Yang Ji frowned slightly and ordered Lu Yuanhua and Xiao Yu, who were not far away. Lu Yuanhua and Xiao Yu looked at each other and responded in unison. They each unleashed their own law powers and rushed towards the battle between Zhenmu and Old Man Tiandu. The law of fire emerged around Xiao Yu's body, while Lu Yuanhua grasped the law of gold. As soon as this law was used, his entire body was covered in golden light, as if he was made of gold and stone. It was extremely majestic and powerful. It's the Peak Master of Ao Yuan Peak, Xiao Yu, and the Peak Master of Divine Devil Peak, Lu Yuan Hua. With the two of them joining in, I'm afraid Jian Mu will be stopped. Many disciples in the inner courtyard saw Xiao Yu and Lu Yuan Hua rushing over. Their eyes turned cold as they discussed spiritedly. Boom. 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 Once Lu Yuan Hua and Xiao Yu joined in, old man Tian Du, who had been suppressed, finally breathed a sigh of relief. The pressure on his body also lessened a lot. Jian Mu, who originally had the upper hand, was completely at a disadvantage after Lu Yuan Hua and Xiao Yu joined in. Even though he was madly waving the emotionless long sword in his hand, he simply couldn't withstand the joint attack of the three peak masters. Boom! Jian Mu let out a muffled groan and flew backwards. He spat out a mouthful of blood and his face turned as pale as snow. The emotionless long sword in his right hand directly collapsed into nothingness at this moment. Swoosh! Countless vines swept out from the void and wrapped around Jian Mu's limbs, making him unable to move at all. Let me go! Jian Mu roared and struggled with all his might, but he simply couldn't break free from the vines that wrapped around him from all directions. He stared at old man Tian Du and the other two with red eyes. Su! Old man Tian Du came to Jian Mu's side. Seeing the crazed look in the former's eyes, he gave a soft sigh and said, "This little guy seems to have deep feelings, just like that little girl Chen Shui." Thinking of the beautiful figure that rushed into the ice and fire dual polarity palace without hesitation, old man Tian Du's eyes were filled with grief. Mu Chunxue was a direct disciple that he valued greatly, but because of that Zhuoan, she had actually entered the ice and fire dual polarity palace. Adding in the fact that the ice and fire energy in the ice and fire dual polarity palace was so wild, old man Tian Du knew that Mu Chunxue's chances of survival were very slim. It's all that Zhuoan's fault. It's fine if that guy dies, but he actually implicated that girl Chen Shui. Thinking of this, old man Tian Du was a little angry. He couldn't help glaring at Xiao Yu not far away, making the latter confused. Rumble. After old man Tian Du led Jian Mu away from the ice and fire dual polarity palace, the ice and fire energy on the surface of the ice and fire dual polarity palace gradually extinguished. A sealing force covered the ice and fire dual polarity palace. The violent tremors gradually calmed down at this moment, and the hearts of many disciples of the inner courtyard also relaxed. Everyone let out a soft sigh of relief. Finally, the wild energy on the surface of the ice and fire dual polarity palace has been sealed. Surprisingly, the inner court disciples didn't cheer and jump for joy, and they felt a heavy feeling instead. Ever since they saw Mu Chunxue enter the ice and fire dual polarity palace for Zhuoan, everyone's heart was touched. Chapter 1380. Mu Chunxue's insistence. Martial uncle. When do you plan to enter the ice and fire dual polarity palace? The moment the ice and fire dual polarity palace was sealed, old man Tiandu and Xiao Yu came to Yang Ji's side and asked in unison. Both of their personal disciples were trapped in the ice and fire dual polarity palace, so the two of them were extremely worried about the safety of Zhuoan and Mu Chunxue. Yang Ji was taken aback, but he glanced at the ice and fire dual polarity palace and said in a deep voice, "At this moment, the ice and fire energy in the ice and fire dual polarity palace is too violent. I can't open the door and enter yet, otherwise the inner courtyard will definitely be destroyed." "Then when can you open it?" Xiao Yu asked anxiously. "A month later," Yang Ji said in a deep voice. Xiao Yu and old man Tiandu's faces darkened. A month was too long. If they opened it then, Mu Chunxue and Zhuoan would probably be dead. "Can you open it earlier?" Old man Tiandu asked hopefully. Yang Ji shook his head and said, "The two of you don't know how violent the ice and fire dual polarity palace is right now, but I know very well that opening it earlier will only do more harm than good." Xiao Yu and old man Tiandu looked at each other and smiled dejectedly. "Let's wait. Perhaps Zhuoan and Chen Shui will still be alive in a month. At that time, I will rescue them." Yang Ji sighed softly. But even Yang Ji himself didn't believe these words. Under such violent ice and fire energy, the chances of 2 juniors below the Saint Realm surviving were too small. Inside the ice and fire dual polarity palace, the terrifying ice and fire energy raged like a monstrous tsunami. The air was filled with 2 different feelings of heat and cold. When these 2 kinds of energy mixed together, the explosive energy produced was extremely terrifying. In this terrifying energy storm, a beautiful figure staggered forward. If one looked carefully, it was Mu Chunxue who had entered the ice and fire dual polarity palace like a moth to a flame. The 3rd floor. Mu Chunxue's beautiful eyes flickered as she stared at the flight of stairs in front of her. Step by step, the red lotus that was originally floating beneath her feet had already vanished. At this moment, Mu Chunxue's bare feet stepped on the scalding hot ground as she advanced towards the 3rd level step by step. The blazing high temperature roasted her bare feet, emitting a somewhat ear-piercing sizzling sound as a burnt smell wafted out like black smoke. Mu Chunxue gripped the Xianming orb tightly in her right hand. Strands of Xianming laws exuded an icy aura, helping Mu Chunxue resist the terrifying ice and fire energy around her. However, the law of Xianming within the Xianming orb was extremely limited. At this moment, the law of Xianming emanating from the surface of the Xianming orb was almost transparent. It would not last for long. The 4th floor. Stepping on the stairs to the 3rd floor, Mu Chunxue slowly entered the 4th floor. The ice and fire energy on the 4th floor was even more violent. Under the terrifying ice and fire energy, Mu Chunxue's petite body was like a small boat that could capsize at any time. However, she was extremely stubborn. Even though her feet were covered in scars from the scorching heat of the ground, she still gritted her teeth and advanced step by step without stopping. The 5th floor. The 6th floor. The 7th floor. Every time she ascended a floor, Mu Chunxue would mutter the same phrase to herself. It was as if these words were encouraging her, making her more determined to continue. It was also letting her know that she was 1 floor closer to the 18th floor. The 7th floor was a long bridge of white snow. Below the long bridge was an endless sea of magma. Back then, Zhuoan had some enlightenment on this floor, which allowed him to combine the 9 flames karmic fire and the dark frost poison to create the ice and fire palace. Huff, huff. When she arrived before the arc at the end of the long bridge, Mu Chunxue's delicate face was covered in many fine beads of sweat. She was sweating profusely and even her breathing had begun to become hurried. However, Mu Chunxue smiled and softly muttered, "It's almost the 8th floor. Only 10 floors away from the 18th floor. The 10th floor is not far, not far." With that, Mu Chunxue took a step forward and entered the 8th floor. Plop. The instant Mu Chunxue stepped onto the 8th floor, an even more terrifying ice and fire energy crushed her body like a towering mountain, causing her to kneel on the ground. The power of the law of mysterious underworld surrounding her had already become faintly discernible. Poochie. A mouthful of cherry-red blood was spat out from Mu Chunxue's mouth. As for her knees, due to the force of her kneeling, they were smashed into the ground. Her knees were scraped open and blood gathered on her legs like a small puddle. Only the 8th floor, only the 8th floor, Mu Chunxue muttered as though she was sleep-talking. She slowly stood up and continued to walk forward. The 8th floor was a mountain range of ice and fire. Mu Chunxue started climbing from the foot of the mountain. Her speed was slow but firm. Her pair of white, jade-like feet were covered in blood as she climbed. It was a ghastly sight. "Wait for me." Mu Chunxue pursed her lips. Even though her feet were covered in blood, she continued to climb step by step. Even though there were more wounds on her feet, she still did not give up. She was very stubborn. Crack. When Mu Chunxue climbed halfway up the mountain, the sound of glass shattering could be heard. Then, the law of mysterious underworld surrounding her shattered like glass. Boom, boom, boom. The terrifying ice and fire energy wreaked havoc like a violent storm. It engulfed Mu Chunxue and tried to tear her into pieces. Mu Chunxue's face changed drastically. She raised her hand and a surge of energy surged out from her body, resisting the ice and fire energy that was squeezing her from the surroundings. However, her condition was too poor. Her delicate body trembled slightly and she was afraid that she would not be able to hold on for long. Mu Chunshue's eyes dimmed and there was even a tinge of despair. She knew that she had reached her limit and could not move forward. Is it over? Mu Chunshue's eyes gradually blurred. Her gaze fell on the ice and fire energies that were constantly gathering around her, but her heart was exceptionally calm. However, she felt that it was a pity that she couldn't see Zhuo Wen one last time before she died. Thinking of this, Mu Chunsue revealed a bitter smile. Soon after, she realized that her eyelids were getting heavier and heavier, and her vision was becoming blurry. Rumble. Suddenly, the entire ice and fire mountain range trembled violently. Then, a huge ice and fire dragon rushed out from the depths of the mountain range. A slender figure stood on the ice and fire dragon. Mu Chunsue slowly fell towards the back of the mountain range. Her delicate body seemed to be boneless as she fell down the mountain range. Her eyes fell on the slender figure on the ice and fire dragon, and a smile appeared on her face. That figure was not unfamiliar to her. It was the figure that she wanted to enter the ice and fire dual pole palace to find. It was her man, Zhuo Wen. Perhaps it's a hallucination before I die. However, to be able to see you one last time before I die, even if it's a hallucination, I'm already satisfied. The smile on Mu Chunsue's face grew wider and wider. Her eyelids grew heavier and heavier. She stretched out her right hand and tried to grab the figure standing on the ice and fire dragon. However, she realized that she had grabbed nothing but air. My eyelids are so heavy, Mu Chunsue muttered softly. Her eyelids grew heavier and heavier as if she would close them at any moment. Ao Wu. A loud dragon's roar rang out as the ice and fire dragon leapt up. Zhuo Wen, who was standing on the dragon's head, suddenly looked down. His pupils shrank as he discovered that a beautiful figure had just fallen from the middle of the ice and fire mountain range. Chen Shui. Zhuo Wen gave a loud roar as his face revealed a look of shock and anger. He jumped off the ice and fire dragon and disappeared into the void. When he reappeared, he was already beside Mu Chunsue and he caught her falling body in his embrace. At this moment, Zhuo Wen's face was very ugly. When he was on the 18th floor, he had sensed that someone had entered the 8th floor of the Ice and Fire Dual Pole Palace because the 8th floor had a transportation channel that the symbol spirit had set up. If someone had entered the 8th floor, Zhuo Wen, who was on the 18th floor, would naturally have sensed it. From Zhuo Wen's point of view, most of the disciples should have left by now. Yet, there was still someone on the 8th level. Therefore, he decided to give it a try and used the teleportation channel to arrive at the 8th level. Soon after, he saw this scene. Chen Shui. Zhuo Wen held Mu Chunsue as his eyes were filled with doubt and worry. He never thought that Mu Chunsue would not have left the Ice and Fire Dual Pole Palace yet. Especially when he saw the scars on Mu Chunsue's bare feet, his heart felt like it was being stabbed by a knife. Zhuo Wen, what I saw was not an illusion. You actually appeared in front of me? Mu Chunsue reached out her jade-like hand and stroked Zhuo Wen's face as she spoke with a sweet smile. Take this snow lotus jade pill first. Zhuo Wen took out a pill from his spirit ring and fed it to Mu Chunsue. The latter did not reject it as she opened her cherry lips and swallowed the pill. After a while, Mu Chunsue's pale face began to turn red, just like a ripe red apple. Chen Shui, why didn't you come out of the Ice and Fire Dual Pole Palace? Zhuo Wen slightly knit his brows as he spoke in a reproachful voice. Mu Chunsue quietly looked at Zhuo Wen as her pure white arms tightly held onto Zhuo Wen. She said in a soft voice, I left 3 months ago, but you didn't come out, so I came in to look for you. Mu Chunsue's words were very simple and her tone was very calm, but Zhuo Wen's heart was moved as he felt a warm feeling in his heart. He was well aware of just how berserk the ice and fire energies in the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace were. For Mu Chunsue to enter the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace at such a time was undoubtedly an extremely unwise decision. But Mu Chunsue had done this and had entered the Ice and Fire Dual Pole Palace without any hesitation. All of this was for Zhuo Wen. Chen Shui. Zhuo Wen tightly hugged the girl in his embrace, but he found that he was at a loss for words. His heart was filled with emotions. Zhuo Wen suddenly realized that meeting a girl like Mu Chunsue was a great fortune for him. He would never let this girl down in his life. Don't say anything, just hold me tight. Mu Chunxue softly muttered. Just like a little kitten, she tightly leaned against Zhuowen's chest. Yuan, I won't say anything else. I'll bring you to the 18th floor. Chapter 1381. Tenderness above the ice and fire dragon, wild winds blew. Mu Chunxue silently looked at the young man hugging her. Looking at his chiseled face, as the wild winds blew, his hair danced in the wind, giving him a different kind of elegance. Furthermore, Mu Chunxue discovered that the berserk ice and fire energy of the Ice and Fire Dual Extremes Palace did not pose any threat to Zhuowen. In fact, in Zhuowen's embrace, the surrounding ice and fire energy that had been trying to corrode her seemed to be afraid of something and began to disperse. After a while, Zhuowen carried Mu Chunxue to the 18th floor. The ice and fire energy of the 18th floor was much more terrifying than the 8th floor. They were as dense as blades, making Mu Chunxue's scalp turn numb. The giant dragon descended and Zhuowen walked down the dragon's head. The surrounding terrifying ice and fire energy all avoided him, as if they were welcoming their king. In the center of the 18th floor, there was a giant cage. Inside the cage, there was a strange talisman floating there. The talisman was releasing the power of ice and fire. Ice Flame Sacred Talisman? Mu Chunxue was stunned, but she immediately guessed the name of the talisman floating in the center of the cage. After all, the Ice and Fire Dual Extremes Palace was the sacred weapon that suppressed the Ice Flame Sacred Talisman. Other than the Ice Flame Sacred Talisman hidden in the depths of the Ice and Fire Dual Extremes Palace, Mu Chunxue could not think of anything else. Zhuowen placed Mu Chunxue on the ground and said with a sigh, "Chen Shui, why are you doing this? There's no need to throw away your life for me, it's not worth it." Mu Chunxue slightly shook her head and seriously said, "I feel it's worth it. Even if I have to throw away my life, it's worth it." Seeing Mu Chunxue's serious and stubborn expression, Zhuowen's eyes sparkled and his heart filled with warmth. Then he seriously said, "The Ice and Fire Dual Extremes Palace has already been sealed, so I can't bring you out. However, when the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace opens again, you will have to leave. You cannot throw a tantrum." Mu Chunxue's beautiful eyes were startled, and she subconsciously asked, "What about you? What are you going to do?" Zhuowen smiled and said, "Look at me now. Do I look like someone who's in trouble? Actually, I have my own reasons for not leaving the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Palace. Is it because of the Ice Flame Saint Rune?" Mu Chunxue's beautiful eyes flickered as she asked softly. "Yes. The reason I entered the Holy God Academy, other than you, was also because of the Holy Ice Fire symbol. The reason why I wasn't corroded by the ice and fire energy was because I had refined the symbol spirit of the Holy Ice Fire symbol." Zhuowen smiled. Previously, Zhuowen had used the 9 Flames Karmic Fire and the Dark Frost Poison to create the Ice and Fire Palace, which was extremely effective against the symbol spirit. Zhuowen had also listened to Xiao Hei's suggestion and didn't let the symbol spirit go. Instead, he had completely refined and absorbed it. It was precisely because he had absorbed the symbol spirit that the ice and fire energy in the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Palace didn't dare to attack Zhuowen. Moreover, it was also because Zhuowen had absorbed the symbol spirit that the ice and fire energy in the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Palace had suddenly become violent. Mu Chunxue pursed her cherry lips and gently nodded, "I understand. However, the Ice Flame Saint Rune is an extremely powerful treasure. If you don't have much confidence, you'd better not act rashly. Otherwise, the consequences will be unimaginable. Don't worry, I will act according to my abilities. During the time the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Palace opens, I will slowly help you recuperate from your injuries." Zhuowen smiled as he squatted down and held Mu Chunxue's delicate feet with his right hand. However, Mu Chunxue's feet were now dripping with blood, which was a ghastly sight to behold. Mu Chunxue cried out in alarm and tried to withdraw her feet. Her cheeks were slightly red as she said, "Don't look, it's too ugly. There's blood everywhere." However, Zhuowen shook his head. He tore off the front of his white robe and firmly held Mu Chunxue's feet with his right hand. Soon after, he carefully wiped off the blood on her feet. "Don't worry, as long as it's yours, it's the most beautiful in my eyes. Zhuoan revealed a trace of a gentle smile. When he finished wiping away all the blood on Mu Chunshua's feet, his expression became somewhat ugly. This was because he discovered that Mu Chunshua's feet were now covered in rather dense scars. At this moment, cherry-red blood was still flowing non-stop, which was extremely glaring to the eye. Although with Mu Chunshua's cultivation, ordinary external injuries could be easily healed, these scars were not ordinary injuries. They were terrifying injuries caused by the ice and fire energy of the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Palace. Even if it was an expert of the Emperor realm, it would not be so easy to recover from injuries caused by the ice and fire energy of the Ice and Fire Sacred Talisman. Don't look. Mu Chunxue also saw Zhuowen's expression. Her eyes were shrouded in mist and her voice contained a trace of pleading. She did not want to show her worst side to Zhuowen. Every girl would want to present their best side to their lover when they were in front of him. A girl would doll herself up for her lover. It's all right. I will heal all these scars for you. Zhuowen stretched out his right hand and gently stroked the scars on Mu Chunshue's feet. Waves of immortal energy swept out from his palm and a milky white light gently enveloped Mu Chunshue's feet. Millimeter. Mu Chunxue crossed her arms in front of her chest and leaned on her knees, quietly watching Zhuowen focus on healing her scars. This state lasted for 4 hours. Zhuowen sighed softly, fine sweat trickling down his forehead. He smiled and said, "Finally, all the scars are healed." Lifting his head slightly, Zhuowen happened to see Mu Chunxue staring straight at him. When he looked up, their eyes just happened to meet. Touching his nose, Zhuowen said somewhat jokingly, "Are you looking at me like that because I'm too handsome?" Mu Chunxue did not evade. The corners of her mouth curled into a seductive arc. She curled her lips and said, "It's because there's something dirty on your face. That's why I'm looking at you." "Ah, there's something dirty. Where is it?" Zhuowen was startled. He touched his face awkwardly, as if looking for the dirty thing that Mu Chunxue was talking about. "Hihi, I'll help you find it. The dirty thing is here." Mu Chunxue giggled. Suddenly, she approached Zhuowen, bent down, and kissed Zhuowen's lips, causing the latter to freeze on the spot. Their lips parted. Mu Chunxue looked at Zhuowen with a smile and said, "I've already taken out the dirty thing. It's here." Mu Chunxue pouted as she spoke. She lifted her jade-like hand and pointed at her cherry-red lips. Her eyes revealed a crafty expression. "You're so cunning. You actually snatched away my things without my permission. No, I must snatch it back." Zhuowen pretended to be angry. He suddenly stepped forward, hugged Mu Chunxue, and fiercely kissed her lips. Time slowly flowed by. A month's time passed in an instant. On this day, countless disciples from the 9 peaks of the inner academy raised their heads to look at the sky. The direction they were looking at was the empty space where the Ice and Fire Dual Hall was located. At this moment, Yang Ji, Jiang Xian, Wen Bai and the 9 Peak Masters were quietly floating in front of the Ice and Fire Dual Hall. "A month has passed. I will personally enter the Ice and Fire Dual Hall to take a look. Perhaps, we might be able to find Zhuowen and Mu Chunxue." Yang Ji spoke in a deep voice. "Martial uncle, why do you need to mobilize so many people? Zhuowen and Mu Chunxue can't possibly be alive. You're just wasting your energy," Xianzhong said in a neutral tone. Xiao Yu and Old Man Tian Du glared at the same time and said in unison, "Xianzhong, shut up." Xianzhong was taken aback. Looking at Xiao Yu and Old Man Tian Du, who had such a tacit understanding, he revealed an embarrassed expression and no longer spoke. If it was only Xiao Yu, Xianzhong would have retorted and mocked him. However, since Old Man Tian Du was also criticizing him, it was indeed difficult for him to retort. "You two don't need to quarrel. I originally planned to enter the Ice and Fire Dual Hall. After all, the level of energy in the Ice and Fire Dual Hall this time is far more violent than before. It's really strange. I'm afraid that there's something wrong with the Ice and Fire Saint Rune." Yang Ji waved his sleeve and immediately signaled Jiang Xian and went by with his eyes. Then, the 3 of them stood in 3 different directions of the Ice and Fire Dual Polarity Palace. Each of them formed a seal, and Saint energy surged from 3 directions. Creak. Suddenly, the sealing power around the ice and fire dual hall gradually dissipated, and the gate of the hall slowly opened to both sides. Waves of ice and fire energy spread out, but at this moment, the energy emitted from the ice and fire dual hall was not as violent and terrifying as before. "I'll go in first. You guys wait outside," Yang Ji said and stepped into the ice and fire dual polarity palace. All the disciples of the Nine Peaks were paying close attention to Yang Ji's actions. Many of them were hoping that Yang Ji would be able to find Zhuo Wen and Mu Chunxue. A month ago, Mu Chunxue's actions had touched too many people. No one wanted Mu Chunxue and Zhuo Wen to become a pair of miserable lovebirds because of this. I hope that martial uncle Yang Ji can find Zhuo Wen and sister Chen Shui. I hope that both of them are still alive. On Taishen Peak, Moyan Wushang put his hands together and prayed silently. Not only Moyan Wushang, but also Jianan, Gatha, Mo Lingtian, Qing Yin, Lu Qing and other disciples who had a good relationship with Zhuo Wen. At this moment, all of them were praying that Zhuo Wen and Mu Chunxue could return safely. On the 18th floor of the Ice and Fire Dual Hall, Zhuo Wen slowly opened his eyes and muttered in a low voice, "The Ice and Fire Dual Hall has reopened. So fast." As he said this, Zhuo Wen looked at Mu Chunxue beside him and said, "Chen Shui, I'll send you out first. I'm afraid I'll need some time." Mu Chunxue slightly nodded and said, "Zhuo Wen, be careful. The ice and fire sacred symbol isn't that easy to subdue. If you can't do it, come out as soon as possible." "I know. I'll send you out first. Also, I hope that you won't mention anything about me after you leave. Otherwise, it will cause unnecessary trouble," Zhuo Wen suddenly said in a serious tone. Mu Chunxue sweetly smiled and said, "Don't worry, I won't mention anything about you." Zhuo Wen nodded and immediately waved his right hand. The surrounding ice and fire energy condensed into a giant ice and fire dragon. The giant dragon bent down and lifted Mu Chunxue up. It let out a loud dragon roar and followed the passage to the 8th floor. It broke through the air and disappeared from the 18th floor. Chapter 1382. Re-enter Su. Yang Ji took a step onto the stairs leading to the 8th floor. Just as he was about to head to the 9th floor, an earth-shaking dragon roar filled the air. "Yuan, what is going on?" Yang Ji's footsteps froze as he looked around in a somewhat stunned manner. Following which, a giant ice and fire dragon leapt out from the bottom of the 8th floor. There was a slender and elegant figure standing on the giant ice and fire dragon's body. "Chen Shui?" Yang Ji's sharp eyes fell onto the figure on the giant dragon's body. He could not help but cry out in surprise. He never imagined that after staying in the Ice and Fire Dual Pole Palace for a month, Mu Chunxue would be completely fine. Mu Chunxue leapt off the giant ice and fire dragon's body and landed beside Yang Ji. She respectfully said, "Greetings to Senior Uncle Master Yang Ji. Chen Shui, how did you do it? You're actually completely fine after staying in the Ice and Fire Dual Pole Palace for a month." Yang Ji sized up Mu Chunxue and discovered that the latter was completely fine, without any injuries at all. He could not help but exclaim in surprise. Mu Chunxue's eyes sparkled as she said in a confused voice, "Actually, I'm not sure either. I fainted after entering the 8th floor and when I woke up, I was already on the giant ice and fire dragon's body. As for what happened, I don't know either." "Ice and fire dragon?" Yang Ji was stunned. His eyes fell onto the giant ice and fire dragon's body. However, the giant ice and fire dragon gave a roar before its body collapsed, turning into strands of ice and fire energy. After pondering for a while, Yang Ji realized that he could not figure it out and did not pursue the matter any further. Instead, he said to Mu Chunxue, "Little girl Chen Shui, I'll send you out of the Ice and Fire Dual Pole Palace first. I still need to investigate this place." After saying this, Yang Ji flipped his right hand and Saint Energy wrapped around Mu Chunxue. Soon after, Mu Chunxue was sent out. "Let's head to the 18th level to take a look." That brat Zhuo Wen had previously reached the 18th level. Moreover, the reason why the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall has gone berserk is definitely related to the 18th level. After sending off Mu Chunxue, Yang Ji's footsteps did not stop. He directly passed through the 8th floor and flew towards the depths of the ice and fire dual polarity palace. A light pillar surfaced outside of the ice and fire dual extreme hall. Mu Chunshue's graceful figure appeared in front of everyone. Girl Chen Shui, it's great that you're not dead. Mu Chunshue's appearance caused many people in the inner courtyard to fall silent. Soon after, it caused waves of uproar and commotion. Old man Tianju even came to Mu Chunshue's side with tears streaming down his face. He held Mu Chunshue's shoulders with an emotional expression. Elder sister Chen Shui, sister-in-law, Moyan Wushang, Kanan, Gatha, Qingyan, and Mo Lingtian rushed over from their respective peaks. They looked excitedly at the unharmed Mu Chunshue. I'm fine. Thank you for everyone's concern. Mu Chunshue patted Moyan Wushang's shoulder. Looking at Gatha and the others behind him, her eyes were filled with a gentle smile. Girl Chen Shui, have you seen that brat Zhuowen? That guy shouldn't be dead, right? Xiao Yu immediately walked in front of Mu Chunshue and asked with an emotional expression. Mu Chunshue's beautiful eyes flickered, but she shook her head and said, I didn't see Zhuowen inside because I only reached the 8th floor. The 18th floor is too far and I can't reach it with my strength. When these words were said, Xiao Yu's eyes revealed a look of disappointment. However, thinking about what Mu Chunshue said, it was right. At that time, the energy of the ice and fire dual extreme hall was too wild. With Mu Chunshue's strength, it was almost impossible for her to enter the 18th floor. Then whether Zhuowen is alive or dead is still unknown. Moyan Wushang said with a frown. Relax, big brother Zhuowen is very lucky. Isn't Martial Uncle Yang Ji going to enter the 18th floor of the ice and fire dual extreme hall? At that time, we'll be able to find big brother Zhuowen inside. Kanan said with a heartless smile. On the 17th step, Yang Ji quietly came to the end of the stairs and stared at the ice and fire energy above with a serious expression. The entrance to the 18th floor has been sealed. What is going on? Who did it? Yang Ji frowned and snorted coldly. He suddenly punched out and heavily smashed the entrance to the 18th floor. Rumble. The sound of the sky collapsing and the earth cracking resounded. Then, the entire 17th floor trembled. However, Yang Ji was forced to retreat dozens of steps. The ice and fire energy that sealed the entrance to the 18th floor did not move at all. Why is it so hard? This is the power of the ice-fire holy symbol. Yang Ji's pupils shrank as he exclaimed in disbelief. His full-strength attack was actually unable to shake this ice and fire energy. The only thing that could do this was the power of the Ice-Fire Saint rune. However, what made him puzzled was what had happened on the 18th floor. The Ice-Fire holy symbol had actually activated its power to seal the entrance to the 18th floor. Let me try again. As Yang Ji spoke, he took another step forward. Then, like a storm of attacks, he continuously bombarded the ice and fire energy that sealed the entrance to the 18th floor. Soon after, an extremely terrifying trembling sound was heard. On the 18th floor, Zhuowen stood in front of the entrance with a slightly pale face. Because he had refined the symbol spirit, he was able to use a little of the ice-fire holy symbol's power to maintain the entrance to the 18th floor. However, Zhuowen was an expert of the heavenly saint level after all, and the power of his attacks was not weak. He could only use a little of the ice-fire holy symbol's power. Right now, a portion of Yang Ji's attacks was being withstood by him. Finally, Yang Ji's attacks stopped. Soon after, his brows tightly knitted together. How strange, muttering in a low voice, Yang Ji gave up on attacking and turned around to leave the 17th floor. He knew that since so many attacks were unable to break open the ice and fire energy at the entrance to the 18th floor, there was no point in staying any longer. I've finally left. At the entrance to the 18th floor, Zhuowen let out a sigh of relief. Soon after, he came in front of the cage that held the ice-fire holy symbol and muttered in a low voice, Xiao Hei, after refining the symbol spirit, can I really completely control the ice-fire holy symbol? Of course you can. Originally, you had a certain compatibility with the Ice-Fire Holy symbol because you carried a trace of the Ice-Fire Holy symbol's origin. In addition, you refined the symbol spirit, so you are inextricably linked to the Icefire holy symbol. However, if you want to completely control the Icefire holy symbol, I'm afraid it will take a long time. As for how long, I can't guarantee. Xiao Hei appeared on Zhuowen's shoulder and said indifferently, "This is an excellent opportunity to refine the Icefire holy symbol. I won't let go of this opportunity. No matter how long it takes, I will completely control it." Zhuowen's eyes were filled with determination. Soon after, he sat cross-legged in front of the cage. 9 flames karmic fire and dark frost poison appeared in his hands and combined them to form the Icefire Palace. At this moment, the Icefire Palace had a trace of spirituality. After all, the Icefire Palace had completely refined the symbol spirit of the Icefire holy symbol and integrated it into itself. To put it bluntly, the power of the Icefire Palace was probably several times stronger than before. Zhuowen was communicating with the Icefire holy symbol through this spirituality. From there, he could slowly control the power of the Icefire holy symbol and finally completely control it. However, this required patience and time. Outside the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Palace, Yang Ji's imposing figure slowly appeared, completely attracting the attention of countless people. However, when everyone saw Yang Ji come out alone, their eyes were filled with astonishment. Originally, everyone was puzzled that Yang Ji would bring Zhuowen out, but they did not expect the result to be like this. "Martial Uncle Yang Ji, where is Zhuowen?" Xiao Yu came in front of Yang Ji and asked with an ugly expression. He already had a bad premonition, but he still asked this question. Yang Ji glanced at Xiao Yu and said rather helplessly, "Sorry, I can't enter the 18th floor. There's a strand of ice and fire energy at the entrance. It's extremely terrifying. Even I can't blast it open. Even Martial Uncle Yang Ji can't blast it open." What happened on the 18th floor? Yang Ji's words immediately caused an uproar in the surroundings. Yang Ji was a heavenly saint, but the energy on the 18th floor was actually so terrifying that even Yang Ji could not blast it open. That Zhuowen is just too unlucky. He's actually trapped on the 18th floor just like that. He's probably done for. After recovering from their shock, many people showed pity. He had clearly obtained first place in the battle between the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Palace, but he had ended up like this in the end. It was quite lamentable. How is this possible? Big brother Zhuowen won't die. Jianan couldn't help but shout out. Even Gatha, Mo Lingtian, Qing Yin and Moyan Wushang fell silent. Although they didn't want to believe it, Yang Ji wouldn't lie to them. After all, the former was a heavenly saint expert and the dean of the inner yard. How could such an expert deceive them? Yang Ji shook his head. With a wave of his sleeve, he closed the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Palace. In fact, he also felt that it was a pity. After all, Zhuowen was the second genius after Yuan Ji who could comprehend the void immortal scripture. After doing this, Yang Ji left with Jiang Xian and the 2 elders Wenbai. After Yang Ji left, the 9 peak masters naturally wouldn't stay. They returned to their respective peaks. Of course, their faces were filled with sorrow. Mu Chenshue's beautiful eyes were calm. She followed old man Tianju and returned to Tianju Peak. Only she knew that Zhuowen hadn't met with any mishap. He was silently refining the Ice and Fire sacred symbol. Perhaps when Zhuowen came out, it would be the time for him to amaze the world. However, Mu Chunshue wasn't sure when he would come out. Xiao Yu's face became extremely ugly, even a little gloomy. He stared deeply at the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Palace and sighed. He then left the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Palace and returned to Mysterious Origin Peak. However, at this moment, Xiao Yu looked as if he had aged a dozen years. He was listless. Mysterious Origin Peak finally had a genius like Zhuowen. However, he had fallen in such a way. Xiao Yu simply couldn't accept this fact. "Master," Lu Qing called out softly from Mysterious Origin Peak. Chapter 1383. In a miserable state, time flew by like a wild horse that had escaped its reins. It galloped past like a trickle of water that was completely silent. On this day, A beautiful figure slowly arrived at the side of the cliff at the top of Capital Sky Peak. She lifted her head slightly and quietly observed the ice and fire dual pole hall in the middle of the 9 peaks. At this moment, the ice and fire dual pole hall appeared to be extremely peaceful. The ice and fire energy on its surface slowly flowed like a stream. It quietly flowed and was no longer as wild and violent as before. 2 years have passed. Senior sister Chen Shui would come to this cliff every day and quietly stand there, watching the ice and fire dual pole hall. Senior sister Chen Shui must be doing this because of that Zhuowen. After all, that Zhuowen has never come out ever since he obtained the first place in the ice and fire dual pole hall. Now that 2 years have passed, I'm afraid, he is definitely doomed. It is said that Zhuowen has reached the 18th level. Back then, Martial Granduncle Zhuowen wanted to enter the 18th level, but he was blocked by the ice and fire energy at the entrance. Even Martial Granduncle Yenji's group found it difficult to enter the 18th level. Something ominous must have happened on the 18th level. Moreover, Zhuowen is on the 18th level. Behind the cliff was the enormous square of Capital Sky Peak. At this moment, many Capital Sky Peak disciples were quietly watching Mu Chunshue's beautiful figure as pity filled their hearts. For the past 2 years, Mu Chunshue would stand on the cliff every day, absent-mindedly watching the ice and fire dual pole hall. It was as if she was waiting for someone. This person was known by the entire Inner Academy. He was Zhuowen. While everyone believed that Zhuowen had died in the ice and fire dual pole hall, Mu Chunshue did not believe it. She continued to wait day after day. This action had become a unique sight for Capital Sky Peak over the past 2 years. Many disciples shook their heads and sighed emotionally. Not far from the cliff, there was a bumpy rock. A young man with a sword on his back silently leaned against the rock. His long hair draped over his shoulders, and his eyes were filled with ruthlessness. It was as if nothing in the world mattered to him. However, when this young man's gaze landed on Mu Chunshue's back on the cliff, the ruthlessness in his eyes melted bit by bit like a melting glacier. It's senior brother Jian Mu. He's here too. Some of the sharp-eyed disciples in the square immediately saw the young man leaning against the rock. All of them began to whisper softly. Jian Mu's eyes flickered. In the end, he lifted his foot and climbed up the cliff. He arrived behind Mu Chunshue and hesitated to speak. Mu Chunshue slowly turned around, her beautiful eyes staring at Jian Mu as she calmly asked, "Senior brother Jian Mu, what's the matter?" Jian Mu was stunned. Soon after, he revealed a strained smile and said, "Master asked me to inform you that the 9 Nether Meet will begin in 2 years. He plans to gather us 4 direct disciples at the Zhaixing Pavilion." "What's the matter?" Mu Chunshue asked. "Master plans to activate the Zhaixing Grand Array. He hopes that in these 2 years, the 4 of us can raise our cultivation by another level. This way, after the 9 Nether Meet, we can win face for our inner court and sky capital peak," Jian Mu said. Mu Chunshue nodded and said, "I understand. I'll go to the Zhaixing Pavilion later. I plan to stay here for a while." Hearing this, Jian Mu's eyes dimmed. He said in a low voice, "Junior sister Chen Shui, it's already been 2 years. Although I don't want to speak nonsense, the truth is that Zhuowen might have already fallen." Mu Chunshue's face was extremely calm. She was not moved by Jian Mu's words. "I believe that Zhuowen won't die. Not to mention 2 years, even 10 or 20 years, I'll wait until he comes out," Mu Chunshue said in a serious manner. Hearing this, Jian Mu's eyes dimmed even more. He actually felt a pain in his heart, a pain that felt like a knife was stirring in his heart. "Since that's the case, I won't disturb you any longer. Remember to gather at the Zhaixing Pavilion when the time comes." Jian Mu revealed a smile. Soon after, he turned around and left the cliff. However, the instant he turned around, his eyes regained their emotionlessness and even became somewhat cold. It was as if he had cut off the last trace of emotion in his heart. Mu Chunshue sighed softly as she watched Jian Mu's departing figure. How could she not know Jian Mu's feelings for her? However, she already had Zhuowen in her heart, so how could she possibly have room for anyone else? There was a dense forest several hundred miles away from the entrance of the inner courtyard. To the east of the forest was the middle and lower reaches of the Divine River. The torrential river flowed towards the end of the Divine River like a swimming dragon. Above the Divine River, a figure was fleeing in an extremely sorry state. Cherry-red blood dripped down from the sky like raindrops, dyeing the clear Divine River a strange blood red. The figure's hair was disheveled and his clothes were disheveled. There were several hundred wounds all over his body. Cherry-red blood flowed from these wounds. 100 meters behind this figure, 2 other figures were following closely behind. The 2 of them were dressed in golden armor. One of them carried a golden double-edged axe on his back, while the other held a golden spear. The 2 of them were extremely tall, at least 3 meters tall. They looked like small mountains. Both of their auras were very powerful, like vast mountains. They were both high-level great emperors. Lu Hantian, you won't be able to escape. How dare you molest the young miss of our Marshal Saint Tower? You simply don't know how to write the word death. The man with the double-edged axe on his back shouted in a hoarse voice at the fleeing man in front of him. Lu Hantian's eyes grew colder. He said coldly, "Your Marshal Saint Tower is despicable and shameless. I, Lu Hantian, joined your Marshal Saint Tower and this is how you treat me? You dare to slander me because of this? Your Marshal Saint Tower is a disgrace to one of the 5 great factions of the Divine Spectre realm. Slander you? You really think too highly of yourself. Why would our Marshal Saint Tower need to slander a nobody like you? You were the despicable one who wanted to take advantage of our Marshal Saint Tower's first miss. In the end, our first senior brother saw through your trick. If it weren't for first senior brother, I'm afraid a beast like you would have already succeeded. Our Marshal Saint Tower shouldn't have lured a wolf like you in." The voice of the man with the double-edged axe on his back turned extremely cold. The despicable one is Leng Quan. The one who wanted to molest Ling Yang is Leng Quan. Don't you know how to distinguish between right and wrong? I'm just a disciple who just joined the Marshal Saint Tower. How could I have such a high-grade pill like the insect corpse pill? Lu Hantian cursed. The man with the spear sneered, "Who knows what kind of despicable method you used to get the insect corpse pill? I think you entered the Marshal Saint Tower for our young miss. Now that the matter has been exposed, you dare to slander our first senior brother. What a despicable person. If I don't get rid of you today, how can I show off the might of our Marshal Saint Tower?" As he said that, the man with the spear took a step forward. His speed actually increased to the extreme. In an instant, he closed the distance between him and Lu Hantian. He swung the spear in his right hand. The surface of the golden spear was covered with a golden brilliance. Like a sharp arrow, it pierced through the void and blasted towards Lu Hantian's back. Lu Hantian's pupils shrank. With a shout, he summoned his soul armor, the blood sacrifice sealed gate. Whoosh whoosh. Above the void, a huge blood-red gate fell from the sky and blocked Lu Hantian's back. Ding. The sound of metal clashing resounded. The golden spear's radiance instantly arrived and blasted against the blood-red gate. The gate's forward momentum was immediately stopped. Lu Hantian let out a muffled groan as a trace of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. He was forced to retreat again and again. With the help of the recoil force, Lu Hantian quickly fled forward, creating a distance between the 2 people behind him. Boom! A thunderous sound resounded. The blood sacrifice sealed gate crumbled under the golden spear's radiance. The man with the golden spear followed closely behind. What a slippery fellow. The man with the golden spear only stopped for a moment at the place where the blood sacrifice sealed gate was destroyed. Then, he chased after Lu Hantian again. Lu Hantian's current situation was not good. Although his cultivation had improved a lot in the past 3 years, his cultivation was only at the 6th level Emperor realm. The 2 people behind him were the elite disciples of the Marshal Saint Tower. Their cultivation had reached the 7th level Emperor realm. Facing the pursuit of the 2 people, Lu Hantian was like throwing an egg against a rock. The 3 of them chased and fled. Their speed was very fast and they soon approached the mountain gate of Fine God College. Lu Hantian took out his communication jade charm from his spiritual ring and quickly sent a message to Zhuoan. He knew that if he did not ask Zhuowen for help now, he would be like a lamp without oil. However, Lu Hantian was disappointed that Zhuowen's communication jade charm did not respond at all. What's going on? Why is Zhuowen's communication jade charm not responding? Did something happen? Lu Hantian muttered to himself anxiously. I can only ask for help from Wu Shong and Jianan. Feeling the terrifying aura of the two people behind him, Lu Hantian's expression changed. He could only use his communication jade charm to inform Moyan Wu Shong and the others. On the lotus platform of Tai Shen Peak, Guqin music resounded around the platform. It was like the chirping of an oriole, crisp and pleasant to the ears. In the middle of the platform, there were 3 beautiful figures sitting cross-legged. In front of them, there was a wooden table. On the table, there was a guqin made of sandalwood. Ding! A beautiful figure's delicate body trembled as she accidentally broke the strings of her zither. The other 2 people also stopped their movements because of this break in the sound. Wu Shong, what's wrong? Yuan Wanhe put down her slender hand and turned to look at Moyan Wu Shong behind her. Her beautiful eyes revealed a trace of doubt. Qing Yin also turned her head slightly and looked at Moyan Wu Shong. Moyan Wu Shong flipped her hand and a communication jade charm appeared in her palm. She said in a deep voice, "A friend sent me a distress signal. Someone is chasing after him. Your friend sent you a distress signal. In other words, your friend is near the inner courtyard." Yuan Wanhe was startled and said with surprise, "Senior sister, I have to go out." You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,